What if I told you that right now, buried beneath the cities of Pakistan and India, lie the remains of a civilization so advanced that it had flush toilets when Europeans were living in mud huts, sophisticated sewage systems that wouldn't be matched for 3,000 years, and urban planning so precise that their cities look like they were designed by modern engineers? Here's what will blow your mind. This civilization controlled more territory than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, left behind over 1,400 archaeological sites, and then vanished so completely that we don't even know what they called themselves. In 1920, British archaeologist John Marshall was digging in what he thought was a random hill in Pakistan when his spade struck something that would change everything we thought we knew about ancient history. He had uncovered Harappa, a 4,500-year-old city that was so perfectly planned it makes Manhattan look chaotic. Every single street ran in perfect north, south, and east-west grids. Every house was built with standardized bricks cut to identical proportions, and every neighborhood had covered sewers and private bathrooms with running water. But here's the terrifying part. We have absolutely no idea who built it, what language they spoke, or why an entire civilization just disappeared overnight around 1900 BCE, leaving behind only questions that archaeologists still can't answer. But the sophistication went far deeper than mere city planning. The Harappans had developed one of the world's first known sewerage systems. Every house connected to covered drains that carried waste away from residential areas. Public wells provided fresh water, while private bathrooms featured sophisticated drainage. Some homes even had what archaeologists believe to be the world's first flush toilets. This level of sanitation wouldn't be matched in Europe until the Roman Empire, and even then, Roman systems rarely reached individual homes. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro stands as perhaps the most mysterious structure in the entire civilization. This massive public bathing facility, measuring 39 feet long, 23 feet wide, and 8 feet deep, was constructed with meticulous attention to waterproofing. The floor and walls were made of finely fitted bricks, covered with bitumen and another layer of baked brick. The engineering precision required to create a watertight seal using Bronze Age technology speaks to an incredibly sophisticated understanding of hydraulics and construction. What makes the Great Bath even more intriguing is its apparent ritual significance. Unlike the practical drainage systems found throughout Harappan cities, the Great Bath seems designed for ceremonial purposes. Archaeologists have found no evidence that it connected to the city's sewage system, suggesting the water was considered sacred and couldn't be contaminated with waste. This hints at a complex religious or social system that we can barely comprehend today. The Harappan people were master craftspeople whose artifacts reveal a society obsessed with precision and standardization. They created jewelry of extraordinary delicacy, working gold, silver, and precious stones into intricate designs that required tools and techniques we're still trying to understand. Their bronze working was so advanced that they produced some of the finest metal sculptures of the ancient world, including the famous dancing girl statue from Mohenjo-Daro, whose confident pose and detailed craftsmanship suggest an artistic tradition spanning generations. Perhaps most remarkably, the Harappans developed a system of weights and measures so precise that examples found in cities hundreds of miles apart are identical down to microscopic measurements. These standardized weights facilitated trade across enormous distances, with Harappan heads found as far away as Mesopotamia and Central Asia. The consistency of these standards across such a vast territory suggests a level of administrative control and communication that rivals modern nation-states. The mystery deepens when we consider their undeciphered script. The Harappans left behind thousands of inscribed seals, tablets, and pottery fragments bearing symbols that have resisted every attempt at translation. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, which were cracked through bilingual texts and known languages, the Indus script appears completely isolated. The symbols are found on seals that seem to have been used for trade and administration, but their exact meaning remains locked away. What makes this even more puzzling is that the script appears remarkably sophisticated. Computer analysis has revealed that the Indus symbols follow statistical patterns consistent with natural languages, ruling out the possibility that they're merely pictorial representations. The script shows clear grammatical structures, with certain symbols appearing in predictable positions that suggest syntax rules. Yet despite over a century of attempts by linguists, archaeologists, and computer scientists, the meaning remains elusive. The sudden decline of the Indus Valley civilization around 1900 BCE presents another layer of mystery. Unlike other ancient civilizations that fell to conquest or left clear evidence of their demise, the Harappans seem to have simply faded away. Archaeological evidence suggests a gradual abandonment rather than a catastrophic end. Cities that once housed thousands became ghost towns, their sophisticated infrastructure slowly deteriorating as nature reclaimed the urban landscape. climate change likely played a significant role in this decline. Evidence suggests that around 2000 BCE, the monsoon patterns that had sustained Harappan agriculture for over a millennium began to shift. The life-giving rivers that had made their cities possible may have changed course or dried up entirely. Without reliable water sources, the agricultural surplus that supported their urban civilization would have vanished, forcing people to abandon their cities and return to subsistence farming. But climate change alone doesn't explain the completeness of their disappearance from the historical record. Other civilizations faced similar environmental challenges and adapted, evolved, or left clear traces of their cultural legacy. The Harappans seem to have vanished so thoroughly that even their neighbors forgot they had existed. No later civilization in the region preserves stories or traditions that clearly reference the great cities and their sophisticated culture. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of Harappan life, making their disappearance even more poignant. Excavations at Dhalavira have uncovered a massive water conservation system with reservoirs and channels that could store rainwater for months. At Kalibangan, archaeologists found evidence of plowed fields that are among the earliest known examples of systematic agriculture. These discoveries paint a picture of a civilization that wasn't just advanced for its time, but was actively innovating and adapting to environmental challenges. The Harappans also appeared to have been remarkably peaceful. Unlike their contemporaries in Mesopotamia and Egypt, whose art and architecture glorified war and conquest, Harappan artifacts show little evidence of warfare. No weapons of war have been found in significant quantities, no fortifications protect their cities, and their art contains no depictions of battles or military conquests. This suggests a society that may have resolved conflicts through trade and diplomacy rather than violence, making their eventual fate all the more mysterious. Some scholars speculate that the Harappans may have been the ancestors of later Indian civilizations. Their knowledge and traditions passed down through oral history and cultural practices that evolved over millennia. The mathematical precision evident in Harappan city planning echoes in later Indian architecture and temple construction. Their apparent emphasis on ritual bathing and purification may have influenced Hindu practices that continue today. But without deciphered texts or clear archaeological continuity, these connections remain tantalizingly uncertain. The legacy of the Indus Valley civilization serves as a humbling reminder of how much of human history remains hidden from us. Here was a society that achieved urban planning and engineering feats that wouldn't be matched for centuries, yet they left behind only questions. Their cities stand as monuments to human ingenuity and organization, while their undeciphered script holds secrets that might revolutionize our understanding of early civilization.
In the span of just 50 years, around 1200 BCE, the most powerful civilizations of the ancient Mediterranean world collapsed in what historians call one of history's greatest mysteries. The mighty Hittite Empire, which had rivaled Egypt for supremacy, crumbled overnight. Mycenaean Greece fell into a dark age from which it wouldn't emerge for centuries. Cities across the eastern Mediterranean were burned and abandoned. Trade networks that had connected 3 continents dissolved into chaos. The Bronze Age was ending, but not through gradual decline or natural evolution. It was being torn apart by mysterious invaders the ancient texts call the Sea Peoples, maritime raiders whose origins and ultimate fate remain among archaeology's greatest unsolved puzzles. The first clear evidence of these enigmatic destroyers comes from Egyptian records during the reign of Pharaoh Merneptah around 1213 BCE. Egyptian scribes described massive fleets of foreign ships appearing off the coast, filled with warriors unlike any they had encountered before. These weren't the familiar enemies from Nubia or the Levant, but strangers from lands beyond the sea, bearing weapons and fighting in ways that suggested they came from distant shores. The Egyptian accounts described desperate battles where the fate of civilization itself hung in the balance. What made the Sea Peoples so terrifying wasn't just their military prowess, but their apparent ability to appear anywhere along the Mediterranean coast without warning. Unlike traditional armies that moved predictably along established routes, these maritime raiders could strike at any coastal city, appearing suddenly from the horizon like a storm made of bronze and fire. They seemed to understand naval warfare in ways that land-based powers couldn't counter, using their ships not just for transportation, but as mobile bases for coordinated amphibious assaults. The Egyptian pharaoh Ramses III left us the most detailed account of encounters with the Sea Peoples around 1175 BCE, carved into the walls of his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu. His scribes recorded how these mysterious invaders had already destroyed the great powers to the north. The foreign countries made a conspiracy in their islands. All at once, the lands were removed and scattered in the fray. No land could stand before their arms, from Hatti, Kode, Carchemish, Arzawa, and Alashia on, being cut off at once. This chilling account reveals the scope of the devastation. The Hittites, who had controlled much of modern-day Turkey and northern Syria for centuries, were cut off entirely. Carchemish, one of the ancient world's greatest trading centers, was destroyed. Arzawa, a powerful kingdom in western Anatolia, vanished from history. These weren't minor principalities being conquered. These were major civilizations with armies, fortifications, civilizations and centuries of military experience, all falling to these mysterious sea-borne raiders. The Egyptian records provide tantalizing clues about the Sea People's composition, listing several distinct groups within their confederation. The Peliset, who many scholars believe became the Philistines mentioned in biblical accounts, appear to have been one of the dominant groups. The Checker, Shekelesh, Denyen, and Wesesh are also mentioned, each apparently representing different peoples or tribes that had somehow united in this massive maritime confederation. The diversity of these groups suggests that the Sea Peoples weren't a single nation or ethnic group, but rather a coalition of different peoples brought together by circumstances we can only guess at. Archaeological evidence paints an even more dramatic picture of the destruction these raiders left in their wake. Excavations at sites across the eastern Mediterranean reveal a pattern of sudden, violent destruction around 1200 BCE. At Ugarit, one of the Bronze Age's most important trading cities, archaeologists found evidence of hasty abandonment. Cuneiform tablets were left scattered where scribes had dropped them, some still bearing the clay impressions of fingers that had been working when disaster struck. The city's final letters, preserved by the fire that destroyed the palace, include desperate pleas for military assistance that apparently never came. The destruction at Troy 7a, traditionally associated with the legendary Trojan War, also dates to this period and bears hallmarks of the Sea People's devastation. The archaeological record shows a prosperous city suddenly destroyed by fire, its inhabitants apparently fleeing with whatever they could carry. Similar patterns appear at dozens of sites across Greece, Turkey, Syria, and Cyprus. The consistency of the destruction suggests coordinated attacks rather than random raids, implying a level of organization and planning that challenges our understanding of Bronze Age military capabilities. What makes the Sea Peoples even more mysterious is their apparent technological advantages over the civilizations they defeated. Egyptian artistic depictions show them wielding iron weapons while their enemies still fought with bronze. This might explain their military success. Iron weapons were harder, held sharper edges longer, and could penetrate bronze armor more easily. If the Sea Peoples had somehow mastered ironworking earlier than their opponents, they would have possessed an overwhelming technological advantage similar to Europeans facing pre-Columbian Americans. The Sea Peoples also appear to have revolutionized ancient warfare through their use of combined arms tactics. Egyptian reliefs show them coordinating infantry, archers, and naval forces in ways that suggest sophisticated military doctrine. Their ships were apparently designed specifically for warfare, with high prows that could ram enemy vessels and designs that allowed warriors to fight effectively from deck platforms. This maritime military technology was so advanced that it wouldn't be matched in the Mediterranean for centuries. Perhaps most intriguingly, the Sea Peoples don't appear to have been interested in conquest in the traditional sense. Unlike typical ancient invaders who sought to establish new kingdoms or extract tribute, the Sea Peoples seem to have been focused on destruction and displacement. They burned cities rather than occupying them, scattered populations rather than enslaving them. This has led some scholars to speculate that they weren't conquerors at all, but refugees fleeing some greater catastrophe, fighting desperately for new lands because their homelands had become inhabitable.
Climate data from this period supports the refugee theory. Around 1200 BCE, the eastern Mediterranean experienced severe drought conditions that lasted for decades. Tree ring data, archaeological evidence, and ancient texts all point to widespread crop failures, famine, and social upheaval. If the Sea People's original homelands had become unable to support their populations, their aggressive expansion might have been driven by desperation rather than mere ambition for conquest. The mystery deepens when we consider where these powerful raiders might have originated. Various theories place their homelands everywhere from the western Mediterranean to the Black Sea, from the Italian peninsula to the islands of the Aegean. Some scholars argue for a connection to the collapse of Mycenaean Greece, suggesting that Greek refugees might have become sea raiders after their own civilization fell. Others point to archaeological evidence of population movements in southern Italy or Sicily, regions that could have provided both the maritime expertise and the desperation that drove the Sea People's expansion. Recent archaeological discoveries have added new dimensions to the mystery. Excavations in Turkey have revealed that some Anatolian cities were abandoned before the Sea Peoples arrived, suggesting that the mere threat of their approach was enough to cause populations to flee. At other sites, evidence suggests that local populations might have joined the Sea Peoples rather than fighting them, swelling their numbers and explaining how they maintained their strength strength across multiple campaigns. The ultimate fate of the Sea Peoples remains as mysterious as their origins. After their defeat by Ramesses III around 1175 BCE, they largely disappear from historical records. Some groups, like the Pelesit, appeared to have settled in coastal regions and gradually integrated into local populations. The Philistines of biblical fame likely represent one such settled group, maintaining distinct cultural practices while adapting to their new homeland. Other Sea Peoples groups seem to have simply vanished, leaving behind only their legacy of destruction. The collapse they precipitated ushered in what historians call the Late Bronze Age collapse, a period of reduced population, decreased trade, and technological regression across much of the eastern Mediterranean. Literacy declined dramatically as the palace scribes who had maintained written records fled or died. Artistic traditions were interrupted as craft specialists could no longer find patronage. International trade networks that had connected Europe, Africa, and Asia fragmented into local exchange systems. This dark age wouldn't fully lift for several centuries, and when it did, the world that emerged was fundamentally different. The great Bronze Age empires were gone, replaced by smaller city-states and kingdoms. Iron had replaced bronze as the dominant metal technology. New peoples and cultures had emerged, often carrying only fragmentary memories of the civilizations that had come before. The Sea Peoples represent one of history's great what-ifs. If they had been defeated earlier, would the Bronze Age civilizations have survived and evolved? Would the classical world of Greece and Rome have developed differently if Mycenaean culture had continued unbroken? Would the technological and cultural achievements of places like Ugarit and Carchemish have led to earlier scientific revolutions? The raiders from the sea didn't just destroy cities, they may have altered the entire trajectory of Western civilization. Modern attempts to identify the Sea Peoples using genetic analysis, linguistics, and underwater archaeology continue to yield intriguing but inconclusive results. Shipwrecks off the coasts of Turkey and Israel have revealed Bronze Age vessels that might have belonged to these mysterious raiders, but the evidence remains fragmentary. DNA studies of ancient populations show significant upheaval during this period, but can't yet pinpoint specific migration routes or population origins. The Sea Peoples remain a haunting reminder of how quickly and completely civilizations can vanish. They appeared from historical obscurity, toppled empires that had endured for centuries, and then disappeared back into mystery, leaving behind only ruins and questions. Their story serves as both a fascinating puzzle for archaeologists and a sobering reminder of civilization's fragility.
Between the 1st and 8th centuries CE, while Rome dominated the Western world and China ruled the East, a third superpower controlled the trade routes between Africa, Arabia, and India. The Aksumite Empire, centered in what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, was one of the ancient world's most powerful and sophisticated civilizations, yet it remains virtually unknown to most people today. This African empire minted its own gold coins, built towering stone obelisks that still stand today, and maintained trade networks that stretched from the Roman Empire to Tang Dynasty China. Its rulers commanded respect from Persian Shahs and Byzantine emperors. Its merchants grew wealthy from ivory, gold, and exotic spices, and its armies controlled sea lanes that were vital to international commerce. The empire's origins trace back to the 1st century CE, when Semitic-speaking peoples from southern Arabia crossed the Red Sea and established settlements in the Ethiopian highlands. These migrants brought with them advanced agricultural techniques, knowledge of ironworking, and most importantly, established connections to the lucrative trade networks of the Arabian Peninsula. They encountered indigenous Cushitic-speaking populations who had already developed sophisticated agricultural systems in the highland valleys, creating a cultural fusion that would become the foundation of Aksumite power. What set Aksum apart from other African kingdoms of its era was its strategic geographic position. The empire controlled the Red Sea ports that connected the Roman world with the Indian Ocean trade networks. Merchants traveling between India and the Mediterranean had to pass through Aksumite territory, making the empire incredibly wealthy through customs duties, trade fees, and direct participation in long-distance commerce. Aksumite merchants established trading posts as far away as Ceylon in southern India, while their goods reached markets in Alexandria, Constantinople, and Rome. The wealth generated by this trade allowed Aksum to become one of the ancient world's great building civilizations. The most spectacular surviving monuments are the towering stone obelisks, known as stelae, that still dominate the landscape around the ancient capital. The largest of these monuments, the Great Stela, would have stood over 100 feet tall when complete, making it one of the largest single pieces of stone ever quarried and erected by any ancient civilization. These obelisks weren't just impressive displays of engineering prowess, they were carved with intricate decorations that depicted multi-story buildings, complete with doors, windows, and architectural details that suggest the existence of magnificent palaces and temples that have since disappeared. The precision and sophistication of Aksumite stonework rivals that of any civilization in the ancient world. The stelae were carved from single blocks of granite extracted from quarries miles away and transported to the capital using techniques that required extraordinary engineering knowledge and logistics. The monuments were then erected using methods that archaeologists are still trying to understand. The level of planning required to quarry, transport, and erect these massive stones suggests an incredibly sophisticated understanding of mathematics, engineering, and logistics. Archaeological excavations have revealed that the ancient city of Aksum was far more extensive and sophisticated than the surviving monuments suggest. Beneath the modern town lie the remains of elaborate palace complexes, with multi-story buildings constructed from finely cut stone. These palaces featured advanced architectural elements, including arched doorways, columned halls, and sophisticated water management systems. The famous palace complex, known as Ta'aka Mariam, included a throne hall large enough to accommodate hundreds of people, with walls decorated with carved stone panels and geometric patterns that demonstrate remarkable artistic achievement. The Aksumite Empire was also remarkable for being one of the first major civilizations to officially adopt Christianity. Around 330 CE, King Ezana converted to Christianity, making Aksum Christian even before the Roman Empire fully embraced the faith. This conversion wasn't merely political. It represented a fundamental transformation of Aksumite culture and identity. Churches were built throughout the empire, many carved directly into solid rock using techniques that required incredible skill and planning. The Church of St. Mary of Zion in Aksum claimed to house the original Ark of the Covenant, making the empire a major Christian pilgrimage destination. The adoption of Christianity also connected Aksum to the broader Christian world, establishing diplomatic and trade relationships with the Byzantine Empire and Christian communities throughout the Mediterranean. Aksumite envoys traveled to Constantinople, where they were received with honor by Byzantine emperors. These diplomatic connections weren't merely ceremonial, they facilitated trade agreements, military alliances, and cultural exchanges that enriched both civilizations. Aksumite military power was based on their control of maritime trade routes and their ability to project naval force throughout the Red Sea and Western Indian Ocean. Their ports hosted fleets of merchant vessels and warships that could challenge any rival power in the region. When the Persian Empire attempted to control Yemen and threaten Aksumite trade interests, King Caleb launched a successful military expedition across the Red Sea around 525 CE, demonstrating that Aksum could project power far beyond its homeland borders.
The empire's wealth and power are perhaps best demonstrated by its coinage system, which was among the most sophisticated in the ancient world. Aksumite gold coins were minted to international standards and were accepted in markets from Alexandria to India. These coins featured portraits of Aksumite kings, along with Christian symbols after the empire's conversion, representing a fusion of African royal traditions with Christian iconography. The quality and wide distribution of these coins indicate that Aksum was not just participating in international trade, but helping to shape its standards and practices. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of Aksumite sophistication. Excavations have uncovered evidence of advanced metallurgy, including ironworking techniques that produced high-quality tools and weapons. Aksumite craftsmen created intricate jewelry from gold, silver, and precious stones, demonstrating artistic traditions that combined local African styles with influences from Arabia, India, and the Mediterranean world. Pottery found at Aksumite sites shows influences from across the Indian Ocean trade network, indicating cultural exchanges that went far beyond mere commercial transactions. The empire's agricultural base was equally impressive, utilizing sophisticated terracing and irrigation systems to maximize productivity in the challenging highland environment. Aksumite farmers grew a variety of crops, including teff, barley, and wheat, while also maintaining extensive cattle herds that provided both food and trade goods. The combination of agricultural surplus and trade wealth allowed the empire to support large urban populations and maintain the armies and bureaucracy necessary for controlling such an extensive territory. The decline of the Aksumite Empire began in the 7th century CE, coinciding with the rise of Islamic power in the Arabian Peninsula. The Islamic conquest of Arabia and Egypt disrupted the trade routes that had been the foundation of Aksumite wealth. As Muslim merchants established new trading networks that bypassed traditional Red Sea routes, Aksum found itself increasingly marginalized from the international commerce that had made it wealthy and powerful. Environmental factors also contributed to the empire's decline. Archaeological
evidence suggests that the 8th and 9th centuries saw significant climate changes in the Ethiopian highlands, with reduced rainfall that affected agricultural productivity. Soil erosion from centuries of intensive farming may have further reduced the land's ability to support large populations. The combination of economic isolation and environmental stress gradually weakened the empire's ability to maintain its extensive territories and urban centers. Unlike many ancient civilizations that disappeared entirely, Aksum's decline was gradual rather than catastrophic. The empire slowly contracted geographically, with outlying territories gaining independence, while the core region around the ancient capital maintained reduced but still significant power. The focus gradually shifted from international trade to local agriculture and smaller-scale regional commerce. The great stone monuments were abandoned rather than destroyed, standing as silent witnesses to the empire's former glory. The legacy of Aksum lived on in the Ethiopian highlands, where successor kingdoms maintained many Aksumite traditions and institutions. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church traced its origins to the Aksumite conversion to Christianity, preserving religious traditions and texts that connected modern Ethiopia to its ancient imperial past. The Zagwe dynasty, which ruled Ethiopia from the late 10th to 13th centuries, claimed legitimacy through connection to the Aksumite royal line and continued many of the architectural and artistic traditions that had distinguished the earlier empire. The rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, carved during the Zagwe period, represent perhaps the most spectacular continuation of Aksumite building traditions. These churches, carved entirely from solid volcanic rock, demonstrate engineering and artistic skills that clearly descended from the techniques used to create the great stelae of ancient Aksum. The churches remain active religious sites today, serving as powerful reminders of the sophisticated Christian civilization that once dominated the region. Modern archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of Aksumite civilization, challenging old assumptions about ancient African societies. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of glass production, suggesting that Aksumite craftsmen had mastered techniques that were closely guarded secrets in other parts of the ancient world. Underwater archaeology in Red Sea ports has revealed the remains of Aksumite harbors and shipbuilding facilities that were far more extensive than previously known. The Aksumite Empire's story serves as a powerful reminder of how Eurocentric historical perspectives have obscured the achievements of African civilizations. For over 7 centuries, this African empire was one of the world's major powers, respected by Romans and Persians alike, controlling trade routes that connected 3 continents. Its rulers built monuments that rivaled those of any ancient civilization, its merchants traveled from the Nile to the Ganges, and its influence shaped the development of Christianity in Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. The relative obscurity of Aksum in popular historical consciousness reflects broader patterns of how African achievements have been marginalized or ignored in traditional historical narratives. The empire's story demonstrates that Africa was not isolated from global developments in the ancient world, but was actively shaping them. Aksumite traders, diplomats, and religious figures were major players in the interconnected world of late antiquity, contributing to developments in technology, religion, and culture that influenced civilizations across 3 continents.
In the heart of what is now the American Midwest, centuries before Europeans arrived in the New World, a sophisticated civilization built one of North America's largest cities. At its peak, around 1100 CE, Cahokia housed between 10,000 and 20,000 people, making it larger than London at the same time and comparable in size to many European capitals. This wasn't a collection of simple villages, but a true urban center with monumental architecture, complex social hierarchies, and trade networks that extended from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. The Mississippian civilization that created Cahokia represented the pinnacle of pre-Columbian development in North America, yet it remains largely unknown to most Americans, overshadowed by more familiar ancient civilizations like the Maya or Aztec. The site of Cahokia, located in present-day Illinois across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, was chosen for its exceptional geographic advantages. The location sat at the confluence of the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers, making it a natural hub for river-based transportation and trade. The surrounding river bottoms provided extraordinarily fertile agricultural land, while the nearby bluffs offered defensible high ground and sources of stone for construction. Most importantly, the site controlled access to trade routes that connected the Great Lakes region with the southeastern United States and potentially even Central America. The most spectacular remnant of this lost civilization is Monk's Mound, a massive earthen pyramid that still dominates the landscape today. Rising 100 feet above the surrounding floodplain and covering 14 acres at its base, Monk's Mound is larger than many of the stone pyramids built by other ancient civilizations. Construction of this monument required moving an estimated 22 million cubic feet of earth, all carried in baskets by human labor, since the Mississippians had no wheeled vehicles or draft animals. The precision with which this earthwork was built, with carefully engineered slopes and drainage systems to prevent erosion demonstrates sophisticated understanding of engineering principles. Archaeological evidence at Cahokia reveals that Monk's Mount supported a large wooden structure at its summit, likely the residence and ceremonial center for Cahokia's paramount chief. This building, based on post-hole patterns discovered by excavation, would have been massive by pre-Columbian standards, possibly 100 feet long and 50 feet wide. From this elevated position, the ruler could oversee the entire city and the surrounding countryside, while the building itself would have been visible from miles away, serving as a powerful symbol of authority and divine connection. But Monk's Mound was just the largest of over 100 earthen mounds that once covered the Cahokia site. These mounds served various functions within the complex urban landscape. Some were platforms for important buildings, others were burial sites for the elite, and still others appear to have had astronomical or ceremonial significance. The arrangement of these mounds wasn't random. They were laid out according to careful plans that incorporated sophisticated understanding of geometry, astronomy, and urban planning principles. One of the most remarkable discoveries at Cahokia is the Woodhenge, a series of wooden post circles that served as astronomical observatories. These structures, rebuilt multiple times over the centuries, allowed Mississippian astronomers to track the movements of the sun and stars with remarkable precision. The posts were positioned to mark solstices, equinoxes, and other celestially significant dates that were crucial for agricultural planning and religious ceremonies. The sophistication of these astronomical installations rivals those found at much more famous sites like Stonehenge or Maya observatories. The urban layout of Cahokia demonstrates remarkable sophistication in city planning. The city was organized around a series of plazas or courtyards, with the largest, Grand Plaza, covering nearly 50 acres. This central space could have accommodated thousands of people for ceremonies, markets, or other communal activities. Residential areas were carefully planned, with different districts apparently designated for different social classes or craft specialists. Archaeological excavations have revealed neighborhoods of substantial houses for the elite, as well as more modest dwellings for farmers, craftspeople, and laborers. The economy that supported this urban center was based on intensive agricultural, sophisticated craft production, and extensive trade networks. Mississippian farmers had developed productive agricultural systems that utilized the fertile river bottoms to grow corn, beans, squash, and other crops. They had also learned to manage and harvest wild resources like nuts, seeds, and game animals to supplement their agricultural production. This diverse subsistence base could support dense populations and free specialists to engage in craft production and long-distance trade. Cahokia's craftspeople produced goods that were traded across much of North America. Archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence of specialized production areas for pottery, stone tools, copper ornaments, and shell beads. The quality and sophistication of these goods rival those produced by any pre-Columbian civilization. Mississippian potters created vessels with elaborate decorations that required advanced ceramic techniques. Stone toolmakers produced exquisitely crafted ceremonial objects from materials quarried hundreds of miles away. Copper workers created intricate ornaments and religious artifacts using metal that came from mines in the Lake Superior region. The trade networks that distributed these goods were truly continental in scope. Cahokian goods have been found at archaeological sites from Minnesota to Louisiana, from the Atlantic coast to the Rocky Mountains. In return, exotic materials flowed into the city from across North America. Marine shells from the Gulf Coast were transformed into elaborate ornaments and ceremonial objects. Copper from Lake Superior was worked into religious artifacts and symbols of status. Stone for tools and monuments came from quarries hundreds of miles away in Arkansas and Illinois. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that Cahokia's influence extended even further than previously known. Mississippian-style artifacts and architectural features have been found at sites throughout the southeastern United States, suggesting that Cahokia was the center of a cultural sphere that influenced development across much of the continent. Some scholars now believe that Cahokia may have been the capital of a loose confederation or empire that controlled territory from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico.
The social organization that created and maintained this urban center was clearly complex and hierarchical. Archaeological evidence from elite burials reveals dramatic differences in status and wealth within Mississippian society. The most spectacular of these discoveries came from Mound 72, where archaeologists found the burial of a high-status individual surrounded by elaborate grave goods and the remains of apparent human sacrifices. This burial included hundreds of carefully arranged arrowheads, copper ornaments, mica sheets, and other precious objects, along with the remains of nearly 300 other individuals who appear to have been sacrificed to accompany the deceased ruler into the afterlife. The religious and ceremonial life of Cahokia appears to have centered around what archaeologists call the Southeastern Ceremonial Complex, a shared set of religious beliefs and practices that spread throughout much of the southeastern United States during the Mississippian period. This religious system emphasized connections between earthly rulers and celestial powers, incorporated sophisticated astronomical knowledge, and included elaborate ceremonies involving human sacrifice, ritual purification, and communal feasting. The iconography associated with this religious complex appears on artifacts found throughout the Mississippian world, suggesting a shared spiritual framework that helped unite diverse communities under Cahokian influence. Archaeological evidence also reveals that Cahokia was a cosmopolitan center that attracted people from across North America. DNA analysis of burials from the site has revealed individuals with genetic ancestry from multiple regions, indicating that the city drew immigrants from throughout the continental trade networks. This diversity likely contributed to Cahokia's cultural dynamism and economic success, as immigrants brought knowledge, skills, and connections from their home regions. The decline of Cahokia began in the 13th century and appears to have been gradual rather than catastrophic. Several factors likely contributed to the city's abandonment. Climate change around 1200 CE brought cooler temperatures and reduced rainfall that would have made agriculture more difficult in the region. The intensive farming practices that had supported the large urban population may have led to soil exhaustion and environmental degradation. Political instability and warfare may have disrupted the trade networks that were essential to the city's economy. Archaeological evidence from Cahokia's final centuries reveals increasing signs of conflict and defensive preparations. Wooden palisades were built around portions of the city, suggesting threats from external enemies or internal unrest. The quality and quantity of trade goods found at the site declined significantly during this period, indicating economic problems. By 1400 CE, the great city was largely abandoned, its inhabitants dispersed to smaller communities throughout the region. The abandonment of Cahokia marked the end of the Mississippian civilization's urban phase, though Mississippian cultural traditions continued in many parts of the southeastern United States until European contact. The descendants of the Cahokians likely included the ancestors of many historic Native American tribes, including the Osage, Illinois, and other groups that European explorers encountered in the region. However, the specific connections between ancient Cahokia and historic tribes remain uncertain, as the cultural disruptions caused by European diseases and colonization broke many traditional chains of cultural transmission. The European colonization of the Mississippi Valley, beginning in the 17th century, led to further disruption of Native American communities and loss of knowledge about the region's ancient past. French explorers and missionaries who traveled through the area in the 1600s and 1700s encountered Native American groups who had oral traditions about ancient cities and earthworks, but these accounts were often dismissed by Europeans as folklore or exaggeration. The systematic destruction of Native American cultures through disease, warfare, and forced relocation meant that much traditional knowledge about Cahokia and other Mississippian sites was lost forever. The rediscovery of Cahokia's significance began in the 19th century, when American settlers and scholars started to take serious interest in the mysterious earthworks scattered throughout the Mississippi Valley. Early antiquarians like Henry Brackenridge recognized that the mounds represented sophisticated engineering achievements, but many refused to believe that Native Americans could have created such monuments. This led to the promotion of various mound builder theories that attributed the earthworks to lost European, Middle Eastern, or even extraterrestrial civilizations. These racist theories persisted well into the 20th century, preventing proper understanding and appreciation of Native American achievements. Modern archaeological research, beginning in the mid-20th century, has gradually revealed the true scope and significance of Mississippian civilization. Excavations using scientific methods have demonstrated conclusively that Cahokia and related sites were built by the ancestors of historic Native American tribes. Carbon dating, artifact analysis, and other modern techniques have provided detailed chronologies of the site's development and decline. These studies have revealed that Mississippian civilization was far more sophisticated and influential than previously recognized. The legacy of Cahokia challenges many assumptions about pre-Columbian North America. The existence of this major urban center demonstrates that Native American societies were capable of creating complex civilizations that rivaled those found anywhere in the world. The scale and sophistication of Mississippian achievements force us to reconsider narratives that portray pre-Columbian America as a sparsely populated wilderness inhabited only by simple hunter-gatherer societies. Today, Cahokia Mound's State Historic Site preserves the remains of this remarkable civilization for future generations. The site includes a museum and interpretive center that helps visitors understand the significance of the earthworks and the people who built them. However, much of the original site has been lost to urban development, farming, and erosion. Of the original 100-plus mounds, fewer than 70 survive today, and many of those have been damaged by centuries of plowing and construction. The story of Cahokia serves as a powerful reminder of how much we still don't know about human history and the dangers of cultural chauvinism that prevents us from recognizing achievements by non-European
Mississippian civilizations. The Mississippians created one of North America's greatest cities, developed sophisticated agricultural and craft technologies, and built trade networks that span the continent. Their achievements deserve recognition alongside those of better-known ancient civilizations, and their story helps us understand the rich diversity of human cultural achievement.
For nearly a century, from around 760 to 656 BCE, Egypt was ruled not by native pharaohs, but by black African kings from the south who had conquered the entire Nile Valley and established one of the most powerful empires in the ancient world. These Nubian pharaohs, known to history as the 25th dynasty, or the Black Pharaohs, didn't just conquer Egypt, they revitalized it, restored its ancient monuments, and ruled as legitimate pharaohs who saw themselves as the true guardians of Egyptian civilization. Yet, despite controlling one of antiquity's greatest empires and leaving behind more pyramids than any other dynasty in Egyptian history, the Nubian kingdoms remain largely unknown to the general public, overshadowed by the more familiar narrative of ancient Egypt as exclusively the domain of lighter-skinned Mediterranean peoples. The roots of Nubian civilization stretch back over 4,000 years, developing in parallel with ancient Egypt along the fertile banks of the Nile River in what is now Sudan. The region the Greeks called Nubia and Egyptians called Kush was blessed with abundant natural resources, including gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals that made it wealthy through trade with Egypt and the Mediterranean world. The Nile's cataracts, rocky rapids that interrupted river navigation, created natural boundaries between Egypt and Nubia, but they also forced the development of sophisticated trade networks and diplomatic relationships that connected the two civilizations for millennia. The earliest Nubian kingdom, known to archaeologists as Kerma, emerged around 2500 BCE and quickly became a major power in the region. The city of Kerma, located at the third cataract of the Nile, grew into a major urban center with monumental architecture that rivaled contemporary Egyptian cities. The most impressive surviving structure from this period is the Western Dafufa, a massive mud brick temple complex that still rises over 60 feet above the surrounding landscape. This monument demonstrates that Nubian architects and engineers had mastered large-scale construction techniques that were entirely independent of Egyptian influence. Archaeological excavations at Kerma have revealed a sophisticated urban civilization with advanced craft production, international trade connections, and complex social organization. Kerma's craftspeople produced some of the finest pottery ever created in the ancient world, with thin-walled vessels decorated with intricate patterns that required extraordinary skill to create. Their metalworkers produced bronze weapons and tools that were superior in many respects to contemporary Egyptian examples. Most remarkably, Kerma's rulers were buried in elaborate tumulus graves accompanied by hundreds of sacrificed retainers, indicating a level of royal power and ceremonial complexity that rivaled pharaonic Egypt. The relationship between Kerma and Egypt was complex, involving periods of trade, diplomacy, warfare, and mutual influence. Egyptian records from the Middle Kingdom describe military campaigns against Kerma, but they also reveal extensive trade relationships that brought Nubian gold, ivory, and exotic products to Egyptian markets. Kerma appears to have controlled Egyptian territory as far north as Elephantine during certain periods, while Egyptian influence extended south into Nubian territory during times of pharaonic strength. This back-and-forth struggle continued for over 1,000 years, creating a relationship that was both competitive and symbiotic. The rise of the New Kingdom in Egypt around 1500 BCE marked a new phase in Egyptian-Nubian relations, with pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramesses II conquering much of Nubia and incorporating it into the Egyptian Empire. This period of Egyptian domination lasted for nearly 500 years and had profound effects on Nubian culture. Nubian elites adopted Egyptian religious practices, artistic styles, and even the Egyptian language for official purposes. Egyptian-style temples were built throughout Nubia, and many Nubians served in the Egyptian army and administration, rising to positions of considerable power and influence. However, this Egyptianization of Nubia didn't represent simple cultural surrender. Instead, Nubians selectively adopted and adapted Egyptian practices while maintaining their own distinct cultural identity. Nubian rulers built Egyptian-style temples, but incorporated local architectural elements and religious practices. They adopted Egyptian burial customs, but maintained distinctive Nubian traditions, like bed burials and elaborate grave goods that reflected local rather than Egyptian values. Most importantly, they developed a deep attachment to Egyptian religious and cultural traditions that would later motivate their conquest of Egypt itself. The collapse of Egyptian power in Nubia around 1000 BCE created an opportunity for renewed Nubian independence. The kingdom that emerged, centered at Napata near the Fourth Cataract, inherited both indigenous Nubian traditions and the Egyptian cultural elements that had been introduced during the centuries of imperial rule. This fusion created a unique civilization that saw itself as the legitimate heir to ancient Egyptian greatness, while maintaining distinctively Nubian characteristics. The Napatan rulers established themselves as pharaohs of Upper Egypt and gradually extended their control northward toward the Mediterranean. King Piye, who ruled around 747 to 716 BCE, launched the conquest that would establish Nubian control over all of Egypt. His victory inscription, carved on a massive granite stela now in the Cairo Museum, provides a detailed account of the campaign that reads like an ancient epic poem. Piye portrays himself not as a foreign conqueror, but as a legitimate pharaoh restoring order to a divided Egypt, emphasizing his devotion to Egyptian gods and his respect for Egyptian traditions.
Under Piye and his successors, particularly his brother Shabaka and nephew Taharka, the Nubian Empire became one of the ancient world's greatest powers. At its peak, the empire controlled territory from central Sudan to the Mediterranean Sea, making it larger than most contemporary kingdoms. The Nubian pharaohs ruled from both traditional Egyptian capitals like Memphis and Thebes and from their ancestral capital at Napata, creating a truly international empire that bridged Africa and the Mediterranean world. The Nubian pharaohs were remarkable for their dedication to restoring and maintaining Egyptian cultural traditions that had declined during the chaotic periods preceding their rule. They rebuilt ancient temples, restored traditional religious practices, and commissioned new monuments that followed classical Egyptian artistic styles. Taharka, in particular, was one of the most prolific builders in Egyptian history, commissioning construction projects throughout both Egypt and Nubia that demonstrated the empire's wealth and power. Archaeological evidence reveals that the Nubian period was one of economic prosperity and cultural renaissance for Egypt. Trade networks that had been disrupted during earlier periods of political instability were restored and expanded. The Nubians' control of gold mines in their southern territories provided wealth that funded massive construction projects and supported elaborate court ceremonies. Egyptian art and literature flourished under Nubian patronage, with many works from this period representing the highest achievements of late pharaonic culture. The Nubian pharaohs also played significant roles in international politics, forming alliances and fighting wars with other major powers of their era. Taharka fought against the Assyrian Empire, which was attempting to expand into the Levant and threaten Egyptian territory. These conflicts brought the Nubian Empire into contact with civilizations from Mesopotamia to the Aegean, making the Black Pharaohs significant players in ancient Near Eastern politics. The end of Nubian rule in Egypt came through Assyrian conquest rather than internal collapse. The Assyrian kings Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal launched successive invasions of Egypt in the 670s and 660s BCE, eventually forcing the Nubian pharaohs to retreat south to their traditional territories. However, the loss of Egypt didn't end Nubian civilization. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new phase, centered in the city of Meroe in central Sudan. The Meroitic period, lasting from around 300 BCE to 350 CE, saw the flowering of a distinctively Nubian civilization that combined pharaonic traditions with indigenous African elements and influences from the Hellenistic and Roman worlds. Meroe became a major urban center with monumental architecture, sophisticated craft production, and international trade connections that reached as far as India and China. The city's iron production was so extensive that early archaeologists described it as the Birmingham of ancient Africa, with slag heaps from ancient smelting operations still visible today. Perhaps more remarkably, the Meroitic Nubians developed their own writing system, adapting Egyptian hieroglyphs to write the Meroitic language. This script, used for both monumental inscriptions and administrative documents, represents one of the few indigenous African writing systems and demonstrates the intellectual sophistication of Meroitic civilization. Unfortunately, the Meroitic script remains only partially deciphered, meaning that much of our knowledge about this period comes from archaeological rather than textual sources. The Meroitic queens, known as Kandakes, became legendary figures in the ancient world for their power and independence. These women ruled in their own right, not merely as consorts or regents, and some led military campaigns against Roman forces attempting to expand into Nubian territory. The Roman historian Strabo describes negotiations between Augustus
Augustus Caesar and a one-eyed Kandake, who successfully defended Nubian independence against Roman expansion. These powerful female rulers challenged ancient world assumptions about women's roles and demonstrate the distinctive character of Nubian political traditions. The architectural achievements of the Nubian kingdoms include more pyramids than were built in Egypt itself. The royal cemeteries at Nuri, Kuru, Meroe, and other sites contain over 250 pyramids built for Nubian kings and queens over more than 1,000 years. These monuments, while smaller than the Great Pyramids of Giza, demonstrate remarkable engineering skill and artistic achievement. The Nubian pyramids incorporated distinctive architectural elements like steep angles and decorative chapels that reflected both Egyptian influence and indigenous Nubian traditions. The decline of Meroitic civilization in the 4th century CE appears to have resulted from a combination of factors, including climate change, political instability, and the rise of new powers in the region. The kingdom of Aksum, centered in present-day Ethiopia, expanded westward and may have disrupted Meroitic trade routes. Changes in the course of the Nile and reduced rainfall may have affected agricultural productivity. The conversion of much of the Roman Empire to Christianity also changed trade patterns and diplomatic relationships that had been important to Meroitic prosperity. The legacy of the Nubian kingdoms lived on in the Christian kingdoms that emerged in Sudan during the medieval period. These successor states maintained many Nubian cultural traditions while adopting Christianity and developing new forms of art and architecture that combined Christian, Egyptian, and indigenous African elements. The churches and monasteries they built represent some of the finest achievements of medieval African civilization, although they remain largely unknown to most students of medieval history. Modern archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of Nubian civilization, challenging old assumptions about ancient Africa and demonstrating the sophistication and international connections of these kingdoms. Recent discoveries include elaborate royal tombs, monumental temples, and evidence of sophisticated craft production that rivals the achievements of any ancient civilization. Underwater archaeology at sites flooded by modern dam construction has revealed additional monuments and artifacts that expand our understanding of Nubian achievements. The story of the Nubian kingdom serves as a powerful corrective to narratives that marginalize African achievements or portray ancient Africa as isolated from broader historical developments. For over 2,000 years, Nubian civilizations were major players in international politics and culture, ruling Egypt, trading with Rome and India, and creating monumental architecture that still inspires wonder today. Their achievements deserve recognition alongside those of better-known ancient civilizations, and their story helps us understand the rich diversity and interconnectedness of the ancient world. The Nubian pharaohs who ruled Egypt represented one of history's most remarkable examples of cultural synthesis, combining indigenous African traditions with adopted Egyptian practices to create a civilization that was both authentically African and legitimately pharaonic. Their story challenges simple narratives about conquest and cultural dominance, showing instead how civilizations can influence each other while maintaining their distinct identities. The Black Pharaohs didn't just conquer Egypt, they revitalized it, and their reign represents one of the most successful examples of intercultural synthesis in ancient history. In the heart of the Taklamakan Desert, one of the world's most inhospitable landscapes, archaeologists have uncovered the mummified remains of people who shouldn't exist according to traditional historical narratives. These naturally preserved bodies, dating from around 1800 BCE to 1000 CE, have European features, blonde hair, and blue eyes. Yet they were found thousands of miles from Europe and what is now Western China. They represent the Tocharians, a lost Indo-European civilization that established prosperous kingdoms along the ancient Silk Road, spoke languages more closely related to Celtic and Germanic tongues than to any Asian language, and created a unique Buddhist culture that bridged East and West for over 2 millennia before vanishing from history as mysteriously as they had appeared. The first hints that something extraordinary lay buried in the Tarim Basin came in the early 20th century when European explorers like Arelstein and Albert von Lecoq began investigating ruins scattered across the desert. What they found challenged every assumption about ancient Central Asia. Instead of the expected Chinese or Turkic artifacts, they discovered manuscripts written in unknown languages using familiar alphabets, Buddhist art with distinctly European facial features, and textiles woven in patterns that seemed more at home in Bronze Age Europe than ancient China. The preservation conditions in the Taklamakan Desert are unlike anywhere else on Earth. The extreme dryness, combined with alkaline soil and stable temperatures, created a natural mummification process that preserved organic materials with extraordinary fidelity. Wooden buildings still stand after
1,500 years, paper documents remain readable, and human bodies are so well preserved that researchers can study their DNA, determine their diets, and even identify the diseases that killed them. This remarkable preservation has provided an unprecedented window into a lost civilization. The Tocharian mummies reveal a population that was genetically European, with DNA analysis confirming their relationship to ancient populations from Eastern Europe and Siberia. The earliest mummies, dating to around 1800 BCE, show pure European ancestry, while later remains reveal increasing admixture with Asian populations, suggesting a gradual process of cultural and genetic blending over many centuries. This pattern matches what we know from historical linguistics about the spread of Indo-European languages across Central Asia. The Tocharian languages, known from thousands of manuscripts discovered in the desert ruins, represent one of the most important linguistic discoveries of the modern era. These languages, called Tocharian A, Arshi-Kushan, and Tocharian B, Kushan, are clearly Indo-European, but show features that suggest they separated from other Indo-European languages very early, possibly around 3000 BCE. Remarkably, these languages show closest relationships to the western branches of Indo-European, particularly Celtic and Italic languages, rather than to the geographically closer Indo-Iranian languages of Central and South Asia. The discovery of the Tocharian languages revolutionized our understanding of Indo-European expansion and the ancient history of Central Asia. Previously, scholars had assumed that Indo-European languages spread eastward gradually, with each group settling in territories adjacent to their linguistic relatives. The Tocharians demonstrated that Indo-European expansion was far more complex, with some groups traveling enormous distances to establish themselves in regions far from their linguistic cousins. The Tocharian kingdoms emerged during the first millennium BCE as the Silk Road trade routes began to develop. Their cities, including Karashar, Kucha, and Turpan, became major commercial centers that controlled trade between China and the Western world. These weren't just trading posts, but sophisticated urban centers with monumental architecture, advanced irrigation systems, and cosmopolitan populations that included merchants and craftspeople from across Central Asia. Buddhism came to the Tocharian kingdoms around the 2nd century CE, brought by missionaries traveling the Silk Road from India. The Tocharians embraced Buddhism enthusiastically, but they adapted it to their own cultural traditions and artistic sensibilities. Tocharian Buddhist art is immediately recognizable for its blend of Indian Buddhist iconography with European facial features and artistic styles. Buddha statues from Tocharian sites often have blue eyes and wavy hair, while bodhisattvas are depicted with distinctly European features dressed in clothing that shows both Indian and Central Asian influences. The Tocharians became renowned throughout Central Asia for their Buddhist scholarship and artistic achievements. Their monasteries attracted students from across the Buddhist world, and their artists created some of the finest Buddhist art ever produced. The wall paintings discovered in Tocharian Buddhist caves show extraordinary artistic sophistication, combining Indian Buddhist themes with Persian artistic techniques and European aesthetic sensibilities. These paintings represent a unique fusion of artistic traditions that could only have developed in the cosmopolitan environment of the Silk Road.
Tocharian manuscripts reveal a rich literary tradition that included not only Buddhist texts, but also secular works, including poetry, historical chronicles, and administrative documents. Many of these texts were translations from Sanskrit, but others appeared to be original Tocharian compositions that provide unique insights into their culture and worldview. The variety and sophistication of Tocharian literature suggest a highly educated society with strong literary traditions. The economic foundation of Tocharian civilization was their control of Silk Road trade routes and their development of advanced agricultural techniques suited to the harsh desert environment. They created sophisticated irrigation systems that brought water from distant mountains to their oasis cities, allowing them to support large populations in one of the world's most challenging environments. Their agricultural success was so remarkable that Chinese sources describe the Tocharian kingdoms as islands of prosperity in the vast desert. Tocharian merchants were active throughout Central Asia and beyond, with Tocharian commercial documents found as far west as the Black Sea and as far east as Korea. They dealt in silk, precious stones, spices, and luxury goods, but they also served as cultural intermediaries who facilitated the exchange of ideas, artistic styles, and religious practices across the Silk Road network. The cosmopolitan nature of Tocharian society made their cities natural meeting places for people from diverse cultural backgrounds. The Tocharians also developed their own distinctive musical traditions, as evidenced by the numerous musical instruments found in their archaeological sites. These instruments show influences from across Central Asia and beyond, including lutes, drums, and wind instruments that suggest a rich musical culture. Wall paintings often depict musical performances, indicating that music played an important role in both secular entertainment and religious ceremonies. Archaeological evidence reveals that Tocharian society was highly stratified, with clear distinctions between elite and common classes. Elite burials contain elaborate grave goods, including silk, textiles, jewelry, and imported luxury items, while common burials are much simpler. However, the society appears to have been relatively prosperous overall, with even ordinary people having access to goods and technologies that were considered luxuries in many other parts of the ancient world. The position of women in Tocharian society appears to have been relatively high compared to many contemporary civilizations. Female mummies are often buried with elaborate grave goods, and Tocharian art frequently depicts women in positions of authority or performing important religious functions. Some scholars suggest that Tocharian society may have preserved Indo-European traditions regarding women's roles that had been lost in other Indo-European societies. The decline of the Tocharian kingdoms began around the 8th century CE and appears to have resulted from a combination of factors. Climate change made the desert environment even more challenging, while political instability in China disrupted the trade routes that were essential to Tocharian prosperity. The expansion of Turkic peoples into Central Asia brought new populations and languages that gradually displaced Tocharian culture. The rise of Islam in Central Asia also changed the religious and cultural landscape in ways that undermined traditional Tocharian institutions. The final blow to Tocharian civilization appears to have come from the expansion of the Tibetan Empire in the 8th and 9th century CE. Tibetan forces conquered many Tocharian cities and imposed their own administrative and cultural systems. While some Tocharian communities may have survived under Tibetan rule, their distinctive language and culture gradually disappeared, absorbed into the broader Tibetan cultural sphere. The last clear evidence of spoken Tocharian comes from the 10th century CE, after which the languages appear to have died out completely. However, Tocharian manuscripts continued to be copied and preserved in monastery libraries for several more centuries, suggesting that knowledge of the languages persisted in scholarly and religious contexts even after they were no longer spoken in daily life. The rediscovery of Tocharian civilization in the 20th century has had profound implications for our understanding of ancient history and the development of human civilizations. The Tocharians demonstrate that ancient Central Asia was far more diverse and cosmopolitan than previously believed, with multiple linguistic and cultural traditions coexisting and interacting in complex ways. Their story also shows how civilizations could flourish in seemingly impossible environments through ingenuity, adaptation, and participation in broader networks of trade and cultural exchange. Modern DNA analysis of Tocharian remains continues to provide new insights into their origins and relationships with other ancient populations. Recent studies have confirmed their European ancestry while also revealing the complex pattern of genetic mixing that occurred as they interacted with Asian populations over many centuries. This genetic evidence supports the linguistic evidence for their early separation from other Indo-European groups and their long isolation in Central Asia. The preservation of Tocharian sites remains an ongoing challenge as development, climate change, and looting threaten these irreplaceable archaeological resources. Many sites have already been damaged or destroyed, taking with them unique insights into this lost civilization. International cooperation and local awareness are essential for preserving what remains of Tocharian heritage for future generations. The study of Tocharian civilization also raises broader questions about how we understand ancient history and cultural identity. The Tocharians challenge simple ethnic and geographical categories, showing how ancient peoples could maintain distinct cultural identities while adapting to new environments and integrating influences from diverse sources. Their story reminds us that ancient history was far more complex and interconnected than traditional narratives often suggest. The legacy of the Tocharians lives on not only in their archaeological remains, but also in their contributions to the broader cultural development of Central Asia. Their role in facilitating Silk Road trade and cultural exchange helped shape the development of civilizations across Eurasia. Their Buddhist art and literature influenced artistic and religious traditions throughout the region. Most importantly, their story demonstrates the remarkable adaptability and creativity of human civilizations, showing how people can create thriving communities even in the most challenging environments.
Rising from the confluence of the Blue and White Niles in what is now Sudan, the Kingdom of Kush dominated the ancient world's gold trade for over 1,000 years, controlled iron production that armed much of Africa, and built more pyramids than Egypt itself. Yet this African superpower, which at various times controlled territory from central Sudan to the Mediterranean Sea, remains virtually unknown to most people, despite its crucial role in ancient history. The Kushites weren't merely trading partners or vassals of more famous civilizations. They were technological innovators who mastered iron metallurgy centuries before Europeans, diplomatic power brokers who negotiated as equals with Rome and Persia, and cultural synthesizers who created a unique civilization, blending African, Egyptian, and Mediterranean influences. The origins of Kushite power lay in their control of the gold deposits of the Nubian desert and their early mastery of ironworking technology. While other ancient civilizations were still struggling with bronze technology, Kushite smiths had learned to smelt iron ore and forge tools and weapons that gave their armies decisive advantages in warfare. Archaeological evidence from sites like Meroe reveals massive ironworking operations, with slag heaps
heaps from ancient furnaces covering acres of ground. The scale of this production was so impressive that early archaeologists dubbed Meroe the Birmingham of ancient Africa. The Kushite mastery of metallurgy extended far beyond simple ironworking. They developed sophisticated techniques for working gold, silver, and copper, creating jewelry and ceremonial objects of extraordinary beauty and technical complexity. Kushite goldsmiths produced some of the finest metalwork in the ancient world, with techniques that wouldn't be matched in Europe for centuries. Their control of gold sources made them incredibly wealthy and allowed them to fund massive construction projects, maintain large armies, and engage in diplomatic relationships with distant powers. The political structure of Kush evolved over its long history, but it consistently maintained sophisticated administrative systems that governed territory stretching over 1,000 miles along the Nile Valley. The kingdom was divided into provinces governed by appointed officials who reported to the king or queen at the capital. This administrative system was sophisticated enough to manage complex irrigation projects, coordinate military campaigns across vast distances, and maintain diplomatic relations with multiple foreign powers simultaneously. One of the most remarkable aspects of Kushite civilization was the prominent role of women in political leadership. The Kushites were ruled by powerful queens known as Candaces or Kandakes, who held real political power rather than serving merely as ceremonial figures. These female rulers led military campaigns, negotiated international treaties, and commissioned major construction projects. The tradition of powerful female rulers was so strong in Kush that Roman and Greek sources consistently mention the power and independence of Kushite queens, often expressing surprise at their authority and military capabilities. The most famous of these queens was probably Amenarenas, who ruled Kush around 40 to 10 BCE and led successful military campaigns against Roman expansion into Nubian territory. Roman sources describe her as a fierce warrior queen who lost an eye in battle but continued to lead her armies against Roman legions. Her negotiations with the Roman Emperor Augustus resulted in a treaty that recognized Kushite independence and established the southern boundary of Roman Egypt, demonstrating that Kush could negotiate with Rome as an equal power. Kushite military power was based not only on superior iron weapons, but also on their mastery of cavalry warfare and their use of war elephants. Kushite armies included both infantry armed with iron spears and swords and cavalry units that could move quickly across the desert terrain that surrounded their territory. They also trained and used war elephants in battle, making them one of the few African civilizations to successfully incorporate these massive animals into their military forces. This combination of advanced metallurgy, mobile cavalry, and war elephants made Kushite armies formidable opponents for any ancient power. The architectural achievements of Kush rival those of any ancient civilization, with the royal cemeteries containing over 180 pyramids built for Kushite kings and queens over more than 800 years. These pyramids, while smaller than those at Giza, demonstrate remarkable engineering skill and represent the largest concentration of pyramids anywhere in the world. The Kushite pyramids incorporated distinctive architectural features, including steep angles and elaborate decorative elements that reflected both Egyptian influence and indigenous African traditions. The pyramid complexes at Nuri, Kuru, and Meroe include not only the burial monuments themselves, but also elaborate temple complexes and ceremonial structures that served religious and political functions. The pyramid temples were decorated with relief carvings and paintings that provide detailed information about Kushite religious beliefs, royal ideology, and artistic traditions. These decorations show a sophisticated fusion of Egyptian religious symbolism with distinctly African artistic elements.
The Kushite religious practices combined traditional African beliefs with adopted Egyptian religious concepts, creating a unique spiritual system that reflected the kingdom's cultural diversity. The Kushites worship both Egyptian deities like Amun and indigenous African gods, often blending their attributes and creating new syncretic deities that serve the needs of their diverse population. Their religious art shows clear African influences, with deities depicted with African physical features and wearing distinctly African clothing and jewelry. The capital city of Meroe became one of the ancient world's great urban centers, with monumental architecture, sophisticated water management systems, and diverse populations that included merchants and craftspeople from across Africa and the Mediterranean world. Archaeological excavations have revealed elaborate palace complexes, temples, and residential districts that demonstrate the wealth and sophistication of Kushite urban civilization. The city's location at the confluence of major trade routes made it a natural meeting place for people from different cultural backgrounds. Kushite society was highly stratified, with clear distinctions between royal, noble, and common classes. However, there is evidence that social mobility was possible, with successful merchants and military leaders able to rise in status through their achievements. The kingdom's wealth from gold and iron production, combined with profits from long-distance trade, created a prosperous middle class of craftspeople and merchants who lived in substantial houses and were buried with elaborate grave goods. The Kushites developed their own writing system by adapting Egyptian hieroglyphs to write the Meroitic language, one of the few indigenous African writing systems known from the ancient world. Meroitic script was used for both monumental inscriptions and administrative documents, indicating a high level of literacy among the elite classes. Unfortunately, the Meroitic language remains only partially deciphered, limiting our understanding of Kushite literature, history, and administrative records. Trade was central to Kush's prosperity, with merchants traveling as far as India and the Mediterranean to exchange African products for luxury goods and raw materials. Kushite exports included gold, ivory, ebony, exotic animals, and iron tools and weapons, while imports included silk, spices, wine, and manufactured goods from across the ancient world. This international trade network made Kush one of the wealthiest and most cosmopolitan civilizations of its era. The kingdom's agricultural base was supported by sophisticated irrigation systems that maximized the productivity of the narrow strip of fertile land along the Nile. Kushite engineers built elaborate systems of canals, reservoirs, and water wheels that allowed intensive agriculture in an otherwise arid region. They grew a variety of crops including wheat, barley, millet, and cotton, while also raising cattle, sheep, and goats that provided both food and trade goods. Kushite artistic traditions combined influences from Egypt, the Mediterranean world, and indigenous African cultures to create a distinctive style that is immediately recognizable. Their artists worked in stone, metal, ceramics, and textiles, creating objects that show remarkable technical skill and aesthetic sophistication. Kushite art is characterized by its blend of Egyptian symbolic elements with African physical features and decorative motifs, reflecting the cultural diversity of the kingdom. The decline of Kush appears to have begun in the 3rd century CE and resulted from a combination of factors, including environmental changes, political instability, and economic competition from other powers. Climate change may have reduced the productivity of agriculture along the Nile, while political fragmentation weakened the kingdom's ability to maintain control over its extensive territory. The rise of the kingdom of Axum to the southeast disrupted traditional trade routes and created new competition for control of Red Sea commerce. The conversion of the Roman Empire to Christianity also affected Kushite prosperity by changing trade patterns and diplomatic relationships that had been important to the kingdom's economy. As Christian kingdoms emerged in neighboring regions, Kush found itself increasingly isolated as one of the last major powers in the region to maintain traditional African religious practices. Archaeological evidence suggests that the final collapse of Kush was gradual rather than catastrophic, with the kingdom fragmenting into smaller political units that maintained some Kushite traditions while adapting to changing circumstances. The last known Meroitic inscriptions date to around 400 CE, after which the kingdom appears to have been absorbed by Christian Nubian kingdoms that emerged in the region during the early medieval period. The legacy of Kush lived on in the Christian kingdoms that succeeded it in Sudan, which maintained many architectural and artistic traditions while adapting them to new religious and cultural contexts. The churches and monasteries built by these successor states show clear continuities with Kushite architectural traditions, demonstrating that the cultural heritage of ancient Kush was not entirely lost, but was transformed and preserved in new forms. Modern archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of Kushite civilization, challenging old assumptions about ancient Africa and demonstrating the sophistication and international connections of this remarkable kingdom. The story of Kush serves as a powerful reminder of Africa's central role in ancient history and the sophisticated civilizations that flourished on the continent long before European colonization. The Kushites were not passive recipients of Egyptian or Mediterranean influences, but active participants in ancient international politics and culture, contributing their own innovations and perspectives to the broader development of human civilization.
In the jungles of Cambodia stands Angkor Wat, the largest religious complex ever built by human hands, its towers rising like stone lotus blossoms above a moat that stretches for miles around the central temple. This magnificent monument is just one of over 1,000 temples scattered across 400 square kilometers of what was once the heart of the Khmer Empire, a medieval Southeast Asian superpower that at its peak controlled territory from southern Vietnam to Myanmar and supported urban populations that dwarfed contemporary European cities. Yet despite creating architectural marvels that attract millions of visitors today, the Khmer Empire remains largely unknown outside of archaeological circles. Its sophisticated hydraulic engineering, international trade networks, and cultural achievements overshadowed by more familiar Asian civilizations like China and Japan. The foundations of Khmer greatness were laid in the 8th century CE, when rulers in the region began adopting Hindu religious concepts and Indian political models, creating a unique synthesis of indigenous Khmer culture with imported Indian civilization. This process, known to scholars as Indianization, wasn't simple cultural conquest, but rather selective adoption and creative adaptation of foreign elements to serve local needs and ambitions. Khmer rulers took Sanskrit titles and Hindu religious concepts, but maintained distinctly Southeast Asian political structures and cultural practices. The early Khmer states emerged from a complex process of political consolidation that brought together numerous local chieftains under increasingly powerful kings. These rulers built their power on control of of rice production in the fertile Mekong Delta and Tali Sap Basin, regions where annual flooding deposited rich sediments that could support intensive agriculture. The seasonal rhythm of flooding and recession created unique opportunities for agricultural intensification, but it also required sophisticated water management systems that became the foundation of Khmer engineering excellence. The transformative moment in Khmer history came in 802 CE when Jayavarman II declared himself Chakravartin, or Universal Emperor, establishing the Angkor period that would last for over 600 years. Jayavarman II didn't just proclaim himself king, he revolutionarily transforms the nature of Southeast Asian kingship by introducing the concept of the Devaraja, or God King, a ruler who was considered the earthly representative of Hindu deities. This religious innovation provided ideological justification for centralizing power and mobilizing the massive human resources necessary for the monumental construction projects that would define Khmer civilization. The genius of Khmer civilization lay in their development of the world's most sophisticated pre-industrial hydraulic engineering systems. The Khmer didn't just build temples, they terraformed entire landscapes, creating vast networks of canals, reservoirs, and rice fields that supported urban populations of unprecedented size in Southeast Asia. The Great Reservoir of Angkor, known as the West Barre, covers over 40 square miles and could hold 123 million cubic meters of water. This wasn't just a single construction project, but part of an integrated water management system that included hundreds of smaller reservoirs, thousands of miles of canals, and elaborate systems of locks and gates that controlled water flow across the entire region. Archaeological research using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar has revealed that the Angkor region contained the world's largest pre-industrial urban complex, with a population that may have reached 1 million people at its peak around 1200 CE. This made Angkor larger than any European city of the same period and comparable to the great Chinese capitals. The urban area covered over 1,000 square kilometers, making it larger than modern Los Angeles and demonstrating an organizational capacity that challenges traditional assumptions about medieval Asian civilizations. The temples that tourists visit today represent only a fraction of this vast urban complex. Recent archaeological surveys have identified over 1,000 temple sites within the greater Angkor region, ranging from massive complexes like Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom to smaller neighborhood shrines and family temples. This density of religious architecture is unprecedented in world history and indicates a society where religious construction was not just the privilege of kings, but involved participation from all social levels. Angkor Wat itself, built by Suryavarman VII in the early 12th century, represents perhaps the greatest architectural achievement of the medieval world. The temple complex covers 400 acres and includes over 3,000 carved apsaras, or celestial dancers, miles of intricate bas-relief carvings that tell stories from Hindu epics, and a central tower that rises 213 feet above the surrounding plain. The precision of the construction is extraordinary. The temple is oriented to astronomical alignments with an accuracy that wouldn't be matched by European architects for centuries. But Angkor Wat was just one of many architectural marvels built by Khmer kings. Angkor Thom, built by Jayavarman VII in the late 12th century, enclosed an urban area of nearly 4 square miles within walls that rose 26 feet high. The city's gates were crowned with massive stone faces that scholars believe represented either the king himself or the Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara, creating a landscape where religious and political power were literally carved in stone. The Bayon Temple at the center of Angkor Thom featured 216 enormous stone faces gazing out in all directions, creating one of the most psychologically powerful religious experiences ever created in stone. The economic foundation that supported these massive construction projects was the most productive rice agriculture system in the medieval world. Khmer engineers developed sophisticated techniques for managing the annual flood cycles of the Mekong River and Tonle Sap Lake, creating systems that could produce 3 rice crops per year in some areas. This agricultural productivity was so impressive that Chinese sources describe the Khmer lands as incredibly fertile, with populations that seemed impossibly dense for a tropical region. The Khmer also developed extensive trade networks that connected their empire to China, India, and the broader Southeast Asian world. Khmer merchants traded rice, forest products, and manufactured goods for Chinese ceramics, Indian textiles, and precious metals from across the region. Archaeological excavations at Angkor have uncovered ceramics from as far away as the Middle East, demonstrating the truly international scope of Khmer commercial connections. The cultural achievements of the Khmer extended far beyond architecture and engineering. They developed sophisticated artistic traditions that synthesized Indian religious themes with distinctly Southeast Asian aesthetic sensibilities. Khmer sculpture
culture achieved levels of refinement and expressiveness that rival the greatest artistic traditions anywhere in the world. The famous Angkor smile, found on countless stone faces, represents a unique artistic achievement that captures both divine serenity and human warmth in ways that continue to move viewers today. Khmer literature, though much of it has been lost, included elaborate court poetry, religious texts, and historical chronicles that demonstrate sophisticated literary traditions. The inscriptions carved in stone throughout the empire provide detailed information about Khmer society, politics, and religious beliefs, revealing a civilization with complex philosophical and theological traditions that rivaled those of India and China.
The role of Buddhism in Khmer civilization represents one of history's most remarkable religious transformations. While the early Angkor period was dominated by Hindu religious concepts, Buddhism gradually gained influence, culminating in the reign of Jayavarman VII in the late 12th century, who converted the empire to Mahayana Buddhism. This conversion wasn't just a change in official religion, it represented a fundamental transformation of Khmer culture and society that is reflected in the art, architecture, and social institutions of the period. The decline of the Khmer Empire began in the 13th century and appears to have resulted from a combination of environmental, political, and military factors. Climate change may have disrupted the hydrological systems that were essential to Khmer agriculture, while the rise of Thai kingdoms to the west created new military pressures. The conversion to Theravada Buddhism may have undermined the religious foundations of royal power, as the new form of Buddhism emphasized individual salvation rather than divine kingship. The final abandonment of Angkor in the 15th century marked the end of one of Southeast Asia's greatest civilizations. The massive temples and hydraulic works that had supported 1 million people were gradually reclaimed by the jungle, becoming legendary lost cities that fired the imagination of European explorers who rediscovered them in the 19th century. The French naturalist Henri Mouhot, who published accounts of Angkor in the 1860s, described the temples as rival to the greatest monuments of ancient Rome or Greece. His writings sparked European fascination with Angkor that continues today, though early scholarship often attributed the temples to Indian or even Greek builders rather than recognizing them as achievements of indigenous Khmer civilization. Modern archaeological research has revolutionized our understanding of Khmer civilization, revealing its true scope and sophistication. Satellite archaeology has mapped the full extent of the Angkor urban complex, while ground-based excavations continue to uncover new temples and urban districts. This research has demonstrated that the Khmer created one of history's great civilizations, with achievements in urban planning, hydraulic engineering, and architectural design that weren't surpassed until the modern era. The legacy of the Khmer Empire extends far beyond the tourist attractions of modern Cambodia. The hydraulic engineering techniques developed by Khmer engineers influenced water management systems throughout Southeast Asia. The architectural and artistic traditions established during the Angkor period continued to influence Southeast Asian art and architecture for centuries. Most importantly, the Khmer demonstrated that tropical civilizations could achieve levels of sophistication and scale that rivaled temperate zone civilizations, challenging assumptions about the relationship between environment and cultural achievement. The temples of Angkor continue to inspire wonder and scholarly investigation today. UNESCO designated Angkor as a World Heritage Site in 1992, recognizing both its outstanding universal value and the urgent need for conservation efforts to preserve these irreplaceable monuments for future generations. International teams of archaeologists, conservators, and engineers work continuously to understand and preserve the temples, using advanced technologies like 3D laser scanning and ground-penetrating radar to document and protect this extraordinary heritage. The Khmer Empire serves as a powerful reminder that medieval Asia was home to civilizations that matched or exceeded contemporary European achievements in many areas. The Khmer built larger cities, more sophisticated hydraulic systems, and more impressive religious architecture than their European contemporaries. Their story challenges Eurocentric narratives of world history while demonstrating the remarkable diversity and sophistication of human civilizations.
The rediscovery and study of lost civilizations like those explored in this series reveals the extraordinary diversity of human achievement throughout history, from the urban planners of the Indus Valley to the maritime raiders known as the Sea Peoples, from the African kingdoms that ruled Egypt to the European speakers lost in Central Asian deserts. These civilizations demonstrate that human creativity and adaptability have flourished in every environment and era. Each of these lost civilizations offers unique lessons about human potential and the factors that allow societies to flourish or decline. The Indus Valley civilization shows us that urban planning and sophisticated technology developed much earlier than previously believed. The Sea Peoples remind us how quickly established orders can be overthrown by determined determined raiders. The Aksumite Empire demonstrates Africa's central role in ancient international politics and trade. The Mississippian civilization reveals the sophisticated societies that existed in pre-Columbian North America. The Nubian kingdoms show us powerful African civilizations that conquered and ruled Egypt itself. The Tarkarians prove that ancient populations were far more mobile and diverse than traditional narratives suggest. The Kingdom of Kush illustrates African technological and political achievements that rivaled any ancient civilization. Finally, the Khmer Empire demonstrates that medieval Southeast Asia produced urban civilizations that exceeded European achievements in many areas. These lost civilizations share several common characteristics that help explain both their achievements and their eventual decline. Most were strategically located on important trade routes or controlled valuable natural resources that provided the wealth necessary for monumental construction and military power. They developed sophisticated technologies and administrative systems that allowed them to organize large populations and undertake massive projects. They created synthetic cultures that combined local traditions with adopted elements from other civilizations, resulting in unique cultural achievements that reflected their cosmopolitan connections. Their declines often resulted from similar factors: climate change that disrupted agricultural systems, political instability that weakened central authority, military pressures from expanding neighbors, or economic changes that undermined their traditional sources of wealth. In many cases, their achievements were forgotten or attributed to other civilizations, reflecting biases in how history has been written and preserved. The study of these lost civilizations continues to revolutionize our understanding of world history, revealing the true diversity and interconnectedness of ancient human societies. New archaeological techniques, from satellite imagery to DNA analysis, constantly provide fresh insights into these vanished worlds. Each discovery adds new pieces to the puzzle of human civilization, showing us that our ancestors were capable of remarkable achievements that deserve recognition alongside more familiar historical narratives. Perhaps most importantly, these lost civilizations remind us that all human achievements are temporary and fragile. The mighty cities, impressive monuments, and sophisticated technologies that these civilizations created eventually crumbled or were abandoned, leaving only ruins and artifacts to hint at their former glory. This should inspire both humility about our own achievements and determination to preserve and understand the diverse heritage of human civilization while we still can. The stories of these lost civilizations serve as both inspiration and warning for our modern world. They show us the heights that human creativity and cooperation can achieve, while also reminding us of the forces that can bring even the mightiest civilizations to ruin. In studying their achievements and failures, we gain not only knowledge about the past, but wisdom that might help us build more resilient and sustainable civilizations for the future. As we continue to uncover the secrets of these vanished worlds, we enrich our understanding of what it means to be human and expand our appreciation for the remarkable diversity of human achievement throughout history. Each lost civilization represents thousands of years of human dreams, struggles, innovations, and adaptations, deserving recognition not as curiosities or footnotes, but as integral chapters in the great story of human civilization.
What if I told you that everything you think you know about the pyramids, the Sphinx, and ancient Egypt might be a beautifully crafted illusion? For centuries, history books have given us a neat, convenient story. The pharaohs ordered massive tombs, thousands of workers hauled stone, and under divine command, the wonders of Giza rose from the sands. It's a tidy explanation, one that makes human achievement feel triumphant. But what if this narrative isn't just incomplete? What if it's dead wrong? Picture yourself standing in front of the great Sphinx of Giza. Its lion's body stretches across the desert, while its weathered face, silent and watchful, gazes endlessly towards the horizon. Most guides will tell you it was built some 4,500 years ago by Pharaoh Khafre to guard his pyramid. But here's the first unsettling twist. There's no inscription, no royal proclamation, no definitive proof tying Khafre to this monument. For a pharaoh obsessed with declaring his glory in every stone, that silence is deafening. Now let's pull back the veil of time. Imagine the Sahara not as a barren wasteland, but as a lush, green paradise. Thousands of years ago, rivers carved through the land, monsoon rains drenched the earth, and wildlife roamed freely across what is now sand and dust. Archaeologists call this the African humid period. It lasted between 7,000 and 4,000 BCE, when North Africa was alive with lakes, grasslands, and thriving human settlements. People hunted antelope, painted herds of cattle on cave walls, and lived in communities far more advanced than we usually imagine for this prehistoric era. And here's where the story shatters expectations. In the early 1990s, geologist Robert Schoch stood before the Sphinx, studying the walls of its enclosure. He wasn't trained to follow the official timeline. He was trained to read the scars of stone. What he saw was not the sharp horizontal erosion of desert winds, but deep vertical channels, grooves carved by relentless, heavy rainfall. But Egypt hasn't seen that kind of rain for at least 7,000 years. In other words, the Sphinx may have stood there long before the first Egyptian pharaoh ever wore a crown. Let that sink in. If the Sphinx was built 10,000 years ago, or perhaps even earlier, it predates the Old Kingdom, predates hieroglyphs, predates the very civilization we give credit to for its creation. Suddenly, the Guard of Giza isn't a symbol of pharaonic power, it's a relic from a forgotten world. But who were the builders of this ancient colossus? Why would they carve such a monument? And why did their story vanish into silence? We're left with a guardian that has no name, no owner, and no voice, staring across millennia as if daring us to remember. Now here's the kicker. The temples around the Sphinx, built from limestone blocks carved out of its own enclosure, don't bear the same water erosion. Their edges are sharp and angular, untouched by the ancient rains that sculpted the Sphinx itself. This suggests something almost unthinkable. The temples came later, which means the pharaohs may not have built the Sphinx at all. They may have simply discovered it, claimed it, and built their temples beside it, as if to adopt its mystery. Imagine that for a moment. Egypt's greatest kings, the supposed masters of the ancient world, may have been inheritors, not creators. They found something so awe-inspiring, so impossible to replicate, that they simply attached their names to it, hoping its power would amplify their own. That flips the entire foundation of history upside down. And yet, the silence of the Sphinx continues. Unlike every other monument in Egypt, it carries no hieroglyphs declaring its maker. Pharaohs were not humble. They carved their names on everything. Temples, statues, tombs. But the Sphinx is mute. No dedication, no claim of ownership. That silence isn't just strange, it feels deliberate. So we're left with questions that echo louder than answers. Was the Sphinx built by a civilization lost to time? A culture advanced enough to carve stone on a monumental scale, align it astronomically, and leave it to outlast the ages? Could it be that humanity's story is far older and far stranger than we've been taught? Let's look beyond Egypt for a moment. Across the world, mysterious sites suggest that advanced knowledge existed long before the civilizations we credit with inventing it. In Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, a sprawling complex of megaliths, was built around 12,000 years ago, long before writing or farming. Its builders carved intricate reliefs, aligned stone circles with the stars, and then deliberately buried it for reasons we still can't explain. In Japan, beneath the waves near Yonaguni, divers have found submerged terraces and sharp-angled structures that some argue date back 10,000 years when sea levels were lower. These places don't fit the linear story of progress we've been taught. They whisper of a world where civilizations rose, achieved astonishing things, and then vanished, leaving only stone as evidence. Could the Sphinx belong to that same forgotten chapter? Could it be a surviving remnant of an age when humanity knew far more than we dared to admit? And then there are the myths, fragments of memory dressed as legend. Plato wrote of Atlantis, a civilization that flourished 9,000 years before his time, only to be swallowed in a single day and night of catastrophe. Most historians dismiss it as allegory, but what if myths are not pure invention, but distorted memories of real events? What if the Sphinx is a relic of a lost Atlantis-like world, standing watch over a civilization erased by flood, climate collapse, or disaster? Think about the African humid period ending around 4000 BCE. The Sahara shifted from green paradise to desert wasteland, forcing entire populations to migrate toward the Nile. What if the Sphinx was already ancient by then? What if its builders carved it as a monument to a world they knew was vanishing, a final guardian to mark their existence before the sands buried their memory? And here's where the mystery deepens. In the 20th century, psychic Edgar Cayce claimed the Sphinx guards a hall of records, a hidden chamber containing the knowledge of a lost civilization, perhaps even Atlantis itself. Decades later, ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies beneath the Sphinx, voids, cavities, and possible tunnels. Yet attempts to investigate were blocked, dismissed as natural fissures by authorities. Why the secrecy? Why lock away the possibility of discovery? The story of the Sphinx isn't just about geology or architecture. It's about control, about who gets to decide what history we're allowed to know. If the Sphinx truly predates the Egyptians, if it hides knowledge of a lost age, then our understanding of civilization collapses. Everything we thought we knew about the timeline of human progress would need to be rewritten. The Sphinx doesn't just stand as a monument. It stands as a question, a riddle of stone that refuses to give easy answers. Who carved it? Why is it silent? What truth lies buried beneath its paws? And as we turn from the Sphinx to the towering pyramids beside it, the mystery only deepens. Because what if the Great Pyramid itself isn't just a tomb, but something far more extraordinary, an ancient machine of knowledge, geometry, and cosmic alignment? That's where our journey leads next.
Stand before the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its massive blocks rise into the sky, each one weighing several tons, fitted so precisely that you can barely slip a sheet of paper between them. For centuries, we've been told this was a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu. But here's the problem. No mummy was ever found inside. No inscriptions declare it his resting place. No treasure, no funerary art, no sarcophagus fit for a king. Just empty stone chambers, echoing with silence. If this is truly a tomb, then it is the strangest, most barren tomb in all of Egypt. And yet, the Great Pyramid is anything but simple. Its geometry is so precise, its alignment so flawless, that modern engineers and mathematicians struggle to understand how it was accomplished. The pyramid is aligned almost perfectly to true north, with an error of just 3/60ths of a degree. Think about that. Modern compasses, GPS, and high-tech instruments struggle with such precision, but supposedly, ancient builders with copper chisels and ropes achieved it thousands of years ago. How? Inside, the mystery deepens. The internal structure isn't what you'd expect for a tomb. Instead of elaborate decorations, it is stark, geometric, and strangely functional. There are shafts angled towards specific constellations, Orion's belt and Sirius, the star linked to the goddess Isis. Some researchers suggest these shafts weren't symbolic, but functional, perhaps designed to channel energy, sound, or even knowledge itself. And then there's the King's Chamber, a massive granite room at the heart of the pyramid. The granite blocks are so heavy, some weighing 70 tons, that transporting them from Aswan, hundreds of miles away, would have been a feat even with modern machinery. But why haul such massive blocks to build an empty chamber? And why is this chamber constructed with relieving blocks stacked in a unique way, as if designed to withstand immense pressure or vibration? This is where theories split into two paths. On one hand, traditional Egyptologists insist it was nothing more than an over-engineered tomb. On the other, alternative researchers suggest something far more astonishing, that the Great Pyramid was not a tomb at all, but a kind of machine. Imagine the pyramid not as a static monument, but as a device, an ancient technology designed to harness natural forces. The limestone casing stones that once covered it were polished to a near mirror-like finish, reflecting sunlight brilliantly. Beneath the pyramid, evidence of water erosion suggests underground chambers and shafts that could have filled with water from the Nile. Some researchers propose that this water, combined with the pyramid's geometry, could have created vibrations, resonances, an energy generator of sorts. And here's a fascinating twist. Nikola Tesla, the genius inventor of the modern world, once studied the geometry of the pyramid.
He believed its dimensions and alignment weren't random, but represented universal energy principles. Tesla himself tried to build a wireless energy tower, the Wardenclyffe Tower, based on similar concepts. Could it be that the builders of the pyramid understood principles of energy long before we rediscovered them? But even if we set aside the idea of ancient power plants, the pyramid still encodes mysteries. Its proportions mirror the Earth itself. The ratio of its height to its base equals the same ratio as the Earth's radius to its circumference. Its location at Giza is aligned almost perfectly at the intersection of the longest line of latitude and longitude that crosses more land than any other point on Earth. In other words, it sits at the geographic center of the world's landmass. How could a Bronze Age culture have known this? Unless, of course, they inherited knowledge from a civilization that came before. Now think about the so-called air shafts leading from the King's Chamber. When mapped, their angles point to the Belt of Orion, the constellation associated with Osiris, the god of resurrection and knowledge. The alignment suggests not just architectural brilliance, but deliberate attempts to encode cosmic information. The pyramid may not be a tomb. It may be a star map, a gateway between heaven and earth, a bridge designed to preserve knowledge across time. And some researchers go even further. They argue that the pyramid acts as a resonance chamber, amplifying sound frequencies. When certain tones are sung or played inside, the entire structure vibrates, as if alive with sound. This brings to mind ancient traditions of chanting, mantras, and sound-based rituals. Could it be that the pyramid was used to alter states of consciousness, to connect the human mind with cosmic frequencies? And if so, then the Great Pyramid wasn't about death at all. It was about life, about consciousness, about tapping into something universal. The tomb theory begins to look like a shadow of a deeper truth, a convenient label slapped onto something far more extraordinary. But here's another mystery. How is it built? The official explanation says thousands of workers dragged stones with ropes and ramps. But where are the remains of these massive ramps? To move blocks weighing 70 tons, the ramps would have had to be miles long, requiring more stone than the pyramid itself. No evidence of such mega ramps exists. Then there are the precision cuts in the granite. Some show tool marks that resemble modern saws. Others are so finely cut that they would require diamond-tipped drills even today. This raises a startling possibility. Either the ancient Egyptians possessed lost technologies far more advanced than we imagine, or they inherited techniques from an even earlier culture. And here's where the story turns truly strange. Across the globe, from the pyramids of Mexico to the megaliths of Peru, similar construction techniques appear. Massive stones fitted with surgical precision, aligned with stars, built in ways we still struggle to replicate. Were these cultures connected, or were they all tapping into a universal knowledge handed down from a forgotten source? The Great Pyramid is not alone. It belongs to a family of mysteries spread across Earth. And perhaps together, they point towards a single story, that humanity has risen before, achieved greatness, and then fallen, leaving only stone as the survivor. But here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. If the Great Pyramid is a machine, a message, or a monument of lost knowledge, then what knowledge does it hold? Could it contain a blueprint for energy, for consciousness, for survival? Is it possible that the ancients built it not for themselves, but for us, for the future, for the day when humanity would once again be ready to listen? And maybe, just maybe, that time is now. We've explored the pyramid as more than just a tomb, but what if there are secrets hidden deep inside, sealed chambers, encoded messages, untouched for thousands of years? In Part 3, we'll venture into the hidden rooms of the pyramids, the mysterious anomalies found by modern scans, and the possibility that something, perhaps even someone, is still waiting beneath the stone.
Imagine this. You're deep inside the Great Pyramid. The air is heavy, silent, thick with the weight of thousands of years. Your torch flickers against the walls of granite and limestone. You follow narrow passageways that twist and turn, sometimes forcing you to crawl, until you reach a chamber that feels less like a room and more like a mystery carved from the earth itself. For centuries, these chambers have been thought to be all there is, but new discoveries suggest that the Great Pyramid hides secrets far beyond what we've been allowed to see. Let's rewind to 2017. A team of researchers used a technique called muon tomography, a way of mapping spaces by tracking cosmic particles that pass through solid matter. Think of it like an X-ray for stone. When they scanned the Great Pyramid, they found something shocking: a massive, previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery, a chamber so large it could rival the size of the largest rooms inside the pyramid. Yet this chamber had never been entered, never been explored, never even suspected to exist. Why would such a vast space remain hidden? Some say it's a structural cavity, an architectural byproduct of the pyramid's construction, but skeptics aren't so sure. The pyramid is far too deliberate, far too precise for accidents. Every passage, every angle, every stone seems to serve a purpose. So why build a hidden chamber and never use it unless it was designed to protect something? And here's where things get tantalizing. Legends, myths, and whispers across centuries speak of hidden knowledge stored inside the pyramid. From Herodotus in ancient Greece to modern explorers, there have been claims of secret rooms filled with scrolls, artifacts, even advanced technology from a forgotten world. Could the void discovered in 2017 be the resting place of this knowledge, the so-called Hall of Records that some believe lies under the sands of Egypt? If so, then what could it contain? Imagine ancient scrolls detailing the rise and fall of civilizations we've never heard of, star maps more accurate than our own pointing to the origins of human knowledge, or devices, machines so strange and advanced that they would rewrite everything we think we know about history. This isn't fantasy. It's a possibility that continues to haunt archaeologists, researchers, and dreamers alike. But let's go deeper. Beyond the hidden void, the pyramid is riddled with anomalies that defy explanation. For instance, the Queen's Chamber has two shafts that seem to lead nowhere. They're too small for humans to crawl through, and for centuries they were sealed off. In 1993, an engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robot to explore one of these shafts. After crawling for 200 feet, the robot reached what looked like a small stone door, complete with copper handles. Behind that door, another chamber, and beyond that, another barrier. What lies behind these sealed doors? Why would the builders of the pyramid create secret passageways ending in doors with copper fittings? Were they symbolic, functional, or were they designed to protect something? Something not meant to be touched until the right time. And here's where things bend toward the extraordinary. Some researchers suggest that the pyramid was designed like a vault, a time capsule, intended to preserve not just a king, but the memory of an age. The shafts, chambers, and hidden voids could be part of a complex system designed to safeguard knowledge. Perhaps the pyramid isn't just a tomb, but a library of stone, where the wisdom of a lost civilization waits, hidden, encoded, waiting for humanity to rediscover it. Now think about this. Ancient traditions across the world speak of knowledge being hidden, sealed away until the right moment. In India, there are tales of the 9 unknown men who guard secret sciences. In Central America, the Maya spoke of records hidden beneath pyramids. In Egypt, the myth of Thoth, the god of wisdom, tells of a book containing the secrets of the universe buried in a chamber under the earth. Could all these stories point to the same truth, that our ancestors preserved knowledge in stone, waiting for the day when we'd be ready to receive it? And if so, then maybe the Great Pyramid's hidden chambers are not just physical spaces, but puzzles, codes waiting to be unlocked. Already, some researchers argue that the dimensions of the pyramid encode mathematical constants, the value of pi, the golden ratio, even the speed of light when measured in meters per second. Could it be that the pyramid itself is a message, a blueprint of universal truths written in stone instead of ink? This idea leads us to something profound. What if the Great Pyramid was never meant to be opened in the way we open a tomb? What if the knowledge it preserves isn't scrolls or artifacts, but information embedded in its geometry, its alignments, its resonance? In other words, what if the pyramid itself is the book and we just haven't learned how to read it yet? But then a question arises. Who built it? And why go to such incredible lengths to hide knowledge? Some suggest the pyramid builders foresaw catastrophe, a flood, a global disaster, a collapse of civilization. Perhaps they knew humanity would fall into darkness, forget its origins, and need a reminder, a beacon to guide its way back. That changes everything. It means the pyramid isn't just a relic of the past, it's a gift for the future, a monument designed not for the dead, but for the living, for us. And yet, there's resistance. Every time a new discovery hints at deeper mysteries, official narratives step in with simple explanations. The hidden void? Just a structural cavity. The copper-handled door? A symbolic feature. The strange precision of the geometry? Coincidence. But coincidences pile up until they stop being accidents and start looking like intention. So what are we missing? What truth lies sealed in those chambers, waiting behind stone doors and hidden voids? And perhaps the biggest question is, why are we being kept from finding out? Because here's the twist. Many attempts to explore these anomalies have been blocked, delayed, or shut down. Permissions revoked, research halted, robots recalled. Why the secrecy? What are they afraid we might find? Could it it be that the guardians of history already suspect what's hidden there and fear the consequences of the world knowing? We've walked the passages, uncovered hidden chambers, and touched the edge of forbidden knowledge. But the real question is this: what could be so powerful, so dangerous, that it must be kept from the world? In part 4, we dive into the lost civilization theory, the possibility of advanced technology predating Egypt, and the global connections that suggest the pyramid is just one piece of a much larger hidden story.
For thousands of years, the Great Pyramid has stood in the desert, silent yet commanding, as if guarding a secret bigger than itself. But what if Egypt isn't the beginning of this story at all? What if the pyramid is only one piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that spans the globe, connecting ancient sites and forgotten cultures into a single breathtaking narrative of a lost civilization? Let's begin with a question that has haunted explorers, historians, and dreamers alike. How is it that ancient cultures, separated by oceans and continents, built structures so similar in design, purpose, and mystery? From Egypt's Giza Plateau to the jungles of Central America, from the megaliths of Peru to the stone heads of Easter Island, echoes of the same knowledge appear, as if fragments of a shattered world were scattered across the earth. Take the pyramids of Mesoamerica. The Maya and Aztec built step pyramids rising from the jungles, aligned with the stars, used for rituals of time and cosmos. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan has a base almost identical in size to the Great Pyramid of Giza. Coincidence? Maybe. But then we look deeper. The alignments of Teotihuacan mirror the Pleiades star cluster, just as Giza mirrors Orion's belt. Different continents, different cultures, yet the same obsession with the stars. Travel south to Peru and you find Sacsayhuaman, a fortress of cyclopean stone walls, so perfectly fitted that even a razor blade cannot slide between the blocks. The stones are irregular in shape, massive in size, yet locked together with precision that baffles modern engineers. How did people with no steel tools, no wheels, no cranes move and carve stones weighing over 100 tons? And why does the engineering echo the megalithic blocks found in Egypt? Across the ocean, on Easter Island, the Moai statues stand as silent guardians. Carved from volcanic rock, these massive figures gaze out to sea. Most think of them as heads, but beneath the earth lie entire bodies carved with intricate designs. And here's the link. The oral traditions of the islanders speak of a race of long-eared people, ancestors who came from across the ocean with advanced knowledge, building monuments to honor the gods. Could these myths be distant memories of the same global culture that built the Sphinx and pyramids? Then there's Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a site that rewrites history itself. Buried for thousands of years, it reveals stone circles carved with animals, astronomical symbols, and complex reliefs. Carbon dating places it at over 11,000 years old, thousands before Stonehenge, thousands before the pyramids. Officially, humans at that time were supposed to be hunter-gatherers, with no temples, no agriculture, no advanced tools. And yet here it stands, megalithic architecture at the dawn of time. Who built it? How did they know so much about the stars, about stone, about geometry? The connections multiply. In Bolivia, Tiwanaku and Pumapunku feature stones cut with laser-like precision, interlocking like machine parts. In India, ancient temples are aligned with solstices and equinoxes, carved with astronomical charts. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat mirrors the stars of Draco and aligns with the movements of Venus. Everywhere we look, the same pattern repeats. Stone monuments, cosmic alignments, advanced construction far beyond the supposed capabilities of the cultures that built them. This raises the question, did these civilizations arise independently by coincidence? Or are they remnants of a single, older culture, a lost civilization that once spanned the globe, passing down knowledge, techniques, and myths to its descendants? Plato, writing in 360 BCE, told the story of Atlantis, a mighty civilization that flourished 9,000 years before his time, only to be destroyed in a single cataclysm. Most dismiss it as allegory, but what if it was memory? What if Atlantis wasn't a fantasy, but a name for the world before the flood, a global civilization wiped out by disaster? The timing is curious. Geological evidence shows that around 12,000 years ago, at the end of the Ice Age, the Earth experienced rapid climate shifts. Sea levels rose by over 400 feet, flooding coastlines worldwide. Entire landscapes vanished beneath the waves. Could this be the flood remembered in myths across cultures? The biblical deluge, the Sumerian story of Gilgamesh, the Hindu tales of Manu, the Native American flood legends? Could it be that a real,
global catastrophe wiped out a civilization, leaving survivors to scatter, carrying fragments of knowledge that later blossomed into the world's first great cultures? And here's where the pyramids fit in. What if the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx are not beginnings, but survivors? Not the dawn of civilization, but the remnants of an age that came before, preserved in stone while everything else was washed away. If so, then Egypt's old kingdom may have inherited these monuments, repurposed them, claimed them, but not built them. Think about this. When the Spanish arrived in the Americas, they found the Inca ruling vast territories with advanced stone cities. But the Inca themselves admitted they didn't build the oldest structures. They inherited them. They pointed to the megalithic walls and said, "These were made by the gods long before our time." Could the Egyptians have done the same, claiming monuments they found already ancient, already weathered, already mysterious? And if so, then what does that say about the story we've been told, that civilization began 5,000 years ago with writing and farming? Maybe that's not the beginning at all. Maybe it's a reboot, a restart after a cataclysm erased what came before. Now here's the part that really stretches the imagination. What if the lost civilization wasn't just advanced in building and astronomy, but in ways we can barely grasp? Energy, consciousness, mathematics, even technology that would seem futuristic today. Could it be that they mastered sound, vibration, and geometry in ways that allowed them to shape stone, move massive blocks, and build structures that still defy our machines? Modern science is starting to catch up to some of these ideas. We now know that sound can levitate objects, that resonance can shatter stone, that frequency can alter matter. What if the ancients knew this too? Not as magic, but as science. And what if they encoded that knowledge into their monuments, waiting for us to rediscover it? The evidence is everywhere if you look with open eyes. The precision, the alignments, the myths, the connections across continents all whisper of a forgotten chapter in human history. A civilization that rose, fell, and left behind only stone and stars as their message to the future. We've traced the outlines of a lost civilization, hidden beneath myths and scattered across continents. But the real question is this: if such a civilization existed, what destroyed it? In Part 5, we'll explore the cataclysms that may have ended the first great age of humanity: floods, comets, earthquakes, and ask whether history might be about to repeat itself. Imagine the world not as it is today, but as it was 12,000 years ago. Vast ice sheets stretched across continents. Sea levels were hundreds of feet lower, revealing land now hidden beneath the ocean. People lived on coasts and river valleys that no longer exist, building communities, temples, maybe even cities we've never seen. Then something happened, something so sudden, so violent, that it reshaped the entire planet and erased an entire chapter of human history. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas, a period of rapid climate chaos that struck around 10,800 BCE. In an instant, the Earth shifted from warming after the Ice Age to plunging back into near glacial cold. Then, just as suddenly, it snapped back into warmth. Temperatures swung wildly. Megafloods tore across continents. Entire species vanished, from mammoths to saber-toothed cats, and human populations, small, scattered, vulnerable, faced near extinction. But what caused it? That question still divides researchers today. Some point to melting ice sheets, releasing massive amounts of fresh water into the oceans, disrupting global currents. Others point to volcanic eruptions. But a controversial and increasingly compelling theory suggests something far more dramatic: a cosmic impact. Evidence has been found across North America and Europe, layers of black sediment rich in microscopic diamonds, platinum, and nanospheres, all signs of a massive explosion in the atmosphere. Some researchers argue that fragments of a comet slammed into Earth, igniting wildfires, sending shock waves across continents, and triggering the Younger Dryas freeze. If true, this was not just a natural climate swing, it was a cataclysm from the sky, one that reshaped civilization itself. Now, connect this to myth. Every culture on Earth carries a memory of a great flood, a global disaster that wiped out an earlier age of humanity. The Bible tells of Noah. The Sumerians told of Utnapishtim. The Hindus told of Manu. Native Americans tell of rising waters swallowing their ancestors' lands. Even in the Andes, the Aymara speak of a flood sent by the gods. Are these just stories, or are they fractured memories of a real event passed down across generations? If so, then the Younger Dryas cataclysm may not just explain the end of the Ice Age, but the destruction of a forgotten civilization. Cities swallowed by rising seas, monuments shattered, knowledge scattered like ashes in the wind. Survivors fled to high ground carrying fragments of wisdom, and thousands of years later, their descendants built the great cultures we now recognize: Egypt, Sumer, India, China, while the memory of the lost world lived on as myth. And here's where the pyramids and the Sphinx take on a new role. What if they are not just monuments, but warning warnings, messages carved in stone to outlast the next disaster. Think about it. Fragile things like wood, parchment, or metal would not survive millennia, but stone, massive, immovable stone, could endure fire, flood, and time itself. If you wanted to send a message to the future, stone would be your medium. The Sphinx, weathered by ancient rains, may bear the scars of that catastrophe, carved before the desert existed, when Egypt was lush and green. The pyramids, with their perfect alignments, may serve as a time capsule, encoding astronomical knowledge so that future generations could rediscover it. Some researchers even suggest that the pyramids align not just with the stars of their time, but with the stars as they appeared 12,000 years ago, before the cataclysm. If true, the builders weren't just recording their world, they were pointing back to a lost age. Now, here's the chilling thought. What if they were also pointing forward? What if they knew such catastrophes are not rare, but cyclical? What if they built the pyramids as both memory and warning, telling us that what happened before could happen again? Modern science backs this up more than we'd like to admit. Earth's history is littered with cosmic impacts and extinction events. Asteroids and comets cross our orbit regularly. NASA tracks thousands of near-Earth objects, any of which could end life as we know it if they struck. We live in a cosmic shooting gallery, whether we want to face it or not. The ancients may have understood this better than we do. Their myths don't just speak of floods. They speak of fire from the sky, of gods hurling stars to punish humanity, of ages ending in catastrophe. The Aztecs told of suns destroyed by fire and flood. The Greeks told of Phaethon, who lost control of the chariot of the sun, burning the earth before plunging into the river Eridanos. Could these be mythologized memories of cosmic impacts witnessed by survivors? And if so, then the pyramids and the Sphinx may be more than relics. They may be markers, anchors of memory, a way of saying, we were here, we knew, beware the sky. Think about it. If you knew a comet was coming, if you knew floods would wipe away your cities, how would you preserve your knowledge? You couldn't rely on books, you couldn't rely on metal, you'd carve it in stone, align it with the stars, and hope that someday, someone, us, would notice. So the question becomes, have we noticed? Are we listening? Or are we ignoring the warnings written in stone, dismissing them as primitive tombs, while the real message stares us in the face? This brings us to an unsettling possibility. What if the story of civilization is not linear progress, but cycles? Rise, fall, memory, and rebirth. A civilization flourishes, a cataclysm strikes, survivors rebuild, knowledge fragments, and the process begins again. The pyramids and the Sphinx may not be the achievements of the first civilization, but the fingerprints of the last. And if that's true, then we are not the pinnacle of history. We're just the latest round. And if cataclysm is cyclical, when is the next one due? We've seen how disaster may have ended the first great age of humanity, but what if the pyramids were not only warnings, but also guides, maps pointing to something hidden, something that survived the cataclysm? In part 6, we'll explore the possibility of secret knowledge, encoded wisdom, and even hidden technology buried beneath the sands of Egypt, waiting for us to uncover it.
For centuries, travelers have stood before the Sphinx and the pyramids, awestruck by their scale, their silence, their stubborn defiance of time. But what if the real secrets of Egypt are not in what we see above the sand, but in what lies beneath it, beneath the paws of the Sphinx, beneath the stone floors of the pyramids, beneath the desert itself? Could there be chambers, vaults, or even technology buried deep underground, waiting to be uncovered? The idea is not new. Ancient Egyptian texts themselves speak of hidden records, secret chambers, where the gods stored their wisdom. The most famous of these legends is the so-called Hall of Records, said to contain the knowledge of a lost age, perhaps even Atlantis itself. According to this tradition, the hall lies beneath the Sphinx, sealed away until humanity is ready to receive its truths. For years, this was dismissed as fantasy. But then came the modern age of exploration. In the 1990s, seismic studies were conducted around the Sphinx. The results? Anomalies beneath its paws, large, rectangular voids that did not appear to be natural. Ground-penetrating radar has confirmed cavities, suggesting underground chambers exactly where the legends say they would be. Yet, despite these findings, access has been restricted. Researchers eager to explore these voids have been blocked. Why? If it's nothing but natural fissures, why not let the world see? Why guard it so carefully? Could it be that the authorities already suspect what lies beneath and fear what it might mean? Let's imagine for a moment that the Hall of Records is real. What might it contain? Scrolls inscribed with forgotten languages, maps of lands that no longer exist, swallowed by rising seas, astronomical charts
dating back tens of thousands of years, proving humanity has tracked the heavens far longer than we're told. Or perhaps objects, machines, or tools so advanced they would shake our understanding of history to its core. The thought isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Across the world, artifacts have been found that don't fit the timeline. In India, ancient texts describe flying machines called vimanas capable of crossing the skies. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki, beings who descended from the heavens and brought knowledge. In Greece, the Antikythera mechanism, a device over 2,000 years old, was discovered in a shipwreck, functioning as a sophisticated astronomical computer. If such things exist, could Egypt hide something even greater? Consider this. The Great Pyramid itself may be a repository of knowledge. Its very dimensions encode universal constants, the ratio of pi, the golden ratio, the speed of light. These aren't accidents. They suggest intentional design, as if the builders wanted to preserve mathematical truths in stone, ensuring they could never be lost. The pyramid may be more than a monument. It may be a textbook written in architecture, teaching us principles of geometry, astronomy, and physics. But what if that's only the surface? What if beneath the pyramid there are hidden vaults containing physical evidence of this knowledge? Ancient historians such as Herodotus, Strabo, and Pliny spoke of vast underground chambers beneath Giza, containing scrolls and treasures of immense value. Over time, these stories were dismissed as exaggeration, but recent scans of the Giza Plateau reveal anomalies, cavities, tunnels, and structures that have yet to be explored. Could the ancient authors have been telling the truth all along? And here's where the story takes a darker turn. Some believe these secrets have already been found, quietly, secretly, and hidden from the public. Whispers of excavations conducted under the cover of night, rumors of artifacts spirited away to private collections or government vaults. Could it be that the greatest discovery in human history has already happened, but we're not allowed to know? Why the secrecy? The answer may be control. Knowledge is power. If the Hall of Records contains proof of a lost civilization, it would shatter the official narrative of history. It would challenge the foundations of religion, culture, and authority. It would reveal that we are not the first, but perhaps the latest in a series of civilizations, rising, falling, rising again. And those in power may not want us to know that our story is far older and far more cyclical than we've been taught. But the sands cannot hide secrets forever. Technology continues to advance. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, muon scans. All of these are slowly peeling back the desert's veil. Every year, new anomalies are discovered. The void above the Grand Gallery, chambers beneath the Sphinx, subterranean tunnels stretching beneath Giza. The evidence is mounting and the questions grow louder. What if the Hall of Records isn't just a metaphor? What if it's real and inside lies not just history, but a warning, a record of the last great cataclysm left behind so that we, the survivors of the next cycle, could learn from the past? If so, then perhaps the guardians of Giza weren't trying to glorify themselves. Perhaps they were trying to save us. Now, let's take a step further. Some researchers believe that the knowledge hidden beneath Egypt is not just historical, but technological. Imagine machines powered by resonance and vibration, capable of cutting and moving stone effortlessly. Imagine devices that harness the energy of the earth, much like Nikola Tesla's experiments centuries later. If such technology once existed, it would explain the impossible feats of construction across the ancient world. And here's the staggering possibility. What if some of that technology still lies buried, untouched for thousands of years, waiting, preserved in sealed chambers, safe from time and weather, ready to be rediscovered? If unearthed, it could change everything. Our science, our energy, our place in the universe. The sands of Egypt may hold the keys to a forgotten age of knowledge, a legacy left behind by those who came before us. But until we open those chambers, until we confront the truth head-on, it remains speculation. Whispers beneath the desert wind. We've explored the possibility of secret vaults, hidden records, and lost technology buried beneath Egypt. But there's one more layer to this mystery: the connection between these monuments and the stars. In Part 7, we'll unravel the celestial code of the pyramids, their alignments with Orion and Sirius, and the possibility that they were not just built for Earth. but as messages to the cosmos.
Stand beneath the shadow of the Great Pyramid at night. The desert sky stretches above you, black velvet studded with glittering diamonds. The air is still. Then, as your eyes adjust, you notice something strange. The stars above and the stones below seem to mirror each other. The arrangement of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau echoes the three stars of Orion's belt. Coincidence or design? For decades, researchers have debated this connection. The Orion correlation theory, first proposed by Robert Bauval, suggests that the pyramids were deliberately aligned to match the constellation of Orion as it appeared in the sky around 10,500 BCE. Why Orion? In Egyptian mythology, Orion was Osiris, the god of resurrection, knowledge, and eternal life. To align their greatest monuments with Osiris was to anchor heaven on earth, to fuse cosmic order with human achievement. But the alignments don't stop there. The Sphinx, facing east, gazes directly at the rising sun on the spring equinox. But around 10,500 BCE, the same epoch when Orion aligned perfectly with the pyramids, the constellation of Leo rose on the horizon at dawn, directly where the Sphinx stares, a lion facing the lion in the sky. The Sphinx and the pyramids together form a cosmic clock, pointing not to 2,500 BCE, as official history tells us, but to an age thousands of years earlier. This suggests something extraordinary. The monuments of Giza may not have been built merely for kings, but to record a date, a moment in deep time, remembered in stone and stars. But why? What was so important about 10,500 BCE? That date, of course, is close to the Younger Dryas cataclysm, the flood, the comet, the collapse of the first great civilization. Could it be that the pyramids and Sphinx are not just tombs and statues, but time markers, a way of saying this is when it happened? Remember this date, remember what was lost. Now, consider the shafts within the Great Pyramid. They point not randomly, but to specific stars, Orion's belt and Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, linked to the goddess Isis. Together, Osiris and Isis represented resurrection and rebirth. The shafts could have been symbolic passageways, guiding the soul of the pharaoh to the heavens. But what if they were more? What if they were astronomical instruments locking the pyramid to the stars as a cosmic anchor? Ancient Egypt was obsessed with the heavens. Their calendar was based on the rising of Sirius, which heralded the flooding of the Nile. Their myths spoke of the gods descending from the stars, of cosmic order mirrored on earth. As above, so below was not just philosophy, it was the blueprint of their civilization. The pyramids, the temples, the Sphinx, they were not just earthly monuments, but star maps carved in stone. And it wasn't only Egypt. Across the world, ancient monuments align with the heavens. Stonehenge marks solstices and eclipses. The temples of Angkor Wat mirror the constellation of Draco. The Nazca lines in Peru trace animals in patterns only visible from the sky, some pointing to solstices and constellations. The Maya pyramids tracked Venus with precision, predicting its cycles over centuries. Everywhere we look, the ancients were not just building, they were coding the stars into their architecture. But why? What were they trying to tell us? One possibility is that these alignments were calendars, marking cycles of time far longer than a single human life. The ancients tracked precession, a slow wobble of Earth's axis, a cycle of 26,000 years that changes the stars we see in the night sky. To measure precession, you need patience, generations of observation, and advanced astronomy. Yet, the builders of Giza encoded it in their monuments. Did they know that civilizations rise and fall not just in centuries, but in cosmic cycles? If so, the pyramids may be more than monuments. They may be warnings written in the sky. They may tell us that we live in cycles of destruction and rebirth tied to cosmic rhythms, that what happened 12,000 years ago could happen again when the cycle repeats. But there's another possibility, even more mind-bending, that the monuments of Giza were not just built for us, but for them, for beings beyond Earth. Imagine you are an advanced civilization capable of traveling the stars. You arrive on Earth and want to leave a marker, a sign for future generations.
generations, or for other travelers that says, "We were here." How do you do it? You build monuments that align with the stars. Monuments so massive and durable that no flood, no war, no empire could erase them. You build a message not in paper or sound, but in stone and starlight. If that sounds like science fiction, consider this. The Great Pyramid sits at the geographical center of Earth's landmass. Its dimensions encode planetary measurements. Its alignments lock it to true north. Its placement seems less like a tomb for a single king and more like a universal beacon, an anchor point for Earth within the cosmos. Could it be that the pyramids are not only messages from the past, but signals to the stars? Cosmic lighthouses, guiding not just us, but anyone traveling the heavens. Whether you believe in lost civilizations, advanced ancient knowledge, or visitors from beyond, one thing is clear. The monuments of Giza are not random. They are deliberate, precise, intentional. They are messages written in the language of geometry and astronomy, a language that transcends time, culture, and even species. The question is, are we ready to read them? We've uncovered how the pyramids and Sphinx may encode cosmic messages, aligning with the heavens to tell a story written across millennia. But there's one final layer to this mystery. In Part 8, we'll bring it all together: the lost civilization, the cataclysm, the hidden chambers, the cosmic code, and ask the ultimate question: what do the pyramids mean for us today, in our time, on the edge of our own uncertain future?
For nearly 5,000 years, the pyramids and the Sphinx have stood in the desert, watching over the Nile, silent yet unshakable. They have seen empires rise and fall. They have watched armies march, kings and queens crowned and forgotten. They have survived floods, earthquakes, invasions, looting, and time itself. And yet, despite their endurance, they remain mysteries. But maybe the greatest mystery isn't how they were built, or who built them, or even when. Maybe the greatest mystery is why. Why would someone or some civilization go to such unimaginable lengths, carving millions of stones, aligning them with the stars, encoding mathematics, geometry, and cosmic cycles into their design? Why would they bury chambers beneath the desert, seal doors with copper, and construct monuments so durable they outlast ages of history? The answer, perhaps, is simple and profound. They were trying to speak to us, not to the people of their own time, not to the pharaohs or priests, but to the future, to us, to a generation far beyond their own, who would one day look back and wonder, who would one day have the tools to finally begin decoding the message. Think about it. If a civilization faced destruction, if they knew a flood or fire from the sky would wipe away everything they had built, how would they preserve their knowledge? Not in fragile scrolls or fleeting monuments. They would choose stone, the one thing that could endure the violence of time. They would build something so massive, so impossible to ignore, that future generations would have no choice but to notice. That's what the pyramids are: a message, a time capsule, a warning, and perhaps a gift. We followed the trail through every layer of the mystery. The Sphinx, weathered by rain, older than the desert itself, staring at the horizon as if remembering a time long forgotten. The Great Pyramid, encoding cosmic constants, planetary ratios, and alignments that lock it not only to the earth but to the heavens. The hidden chambers, voids, and sealed doors that may still guard the lost knowledge of an earlier age. The global connections from Peru to Turkey to Easter Island, suggesting a forgotten civilization once spanned the world. The cataclysms, floods, and fire from the sky that ended that age, leaving only stone as witness. The celestial code, linking Giza to Orion, to Leo, to a date in deep time when humanity nearly vanished. Each piece alone is intriguing. Together, they form a picture too powerful to ignore. The pyramids and Sphinx are survivors of a lost chapter of human history, monuments designed to preserve knowledge and warn us of the cycles that shape our world. And here's the part that matters most. The message isn't just about the past, it's about the future. If history moves in cycles, if civilizations rise and fall with cosmic rhythms, then we may be approaching another turning point. Climate change, natural disasters, the threat of asteroids, all these echo the warnings of the past. The ancients may have seen what we are now only beginning to understand: that human progress is fragile, that everything can be lost in an instant, that survival depends not on ignorance, but on memory. So what do the pyramids tell us? They tell us to remember who we are, where we come from, and what has come before. They tell us that we are not the first, and we will not be the last. They tell us that knowledge, truth, and wisdom are worth preserving, even if it takes 10,000 years for someone to find them again. And maybe, just maybe, they tell us something else: that we are greater than
than we think. That humanity is not a story of small beginnings and slow progress, but a story of cycles, a forgotten greatness waiting to be rediscovered. That within us lies the potential to reach heights we can barely imagine, just as our ancestors once did. The pyramids are not just stone. They are mirrors. They reflect who we are, who we were, and who we might become. They challenge us to ask bigger questions, to think beyond the narrow frame of textbooks, to look up at the stars and wonder not just where we come from, but where we are going. So the next time you see the pyramids, don't see them as tombs. Don't see them as relics of a long dead culture. See them as voices. Voices from the deep past whispering across time, urging us to listen. Because the real mystery of the pyramids isn't that they exist. The real mystery is that they're still here, still waiting, still speaking. And maybe the real question isn't, what if the pyramids were never built by the Egyptians? Maybe the real question is, what if they were built for us? We've journeyed through the mysteries of the pyramids, the Sphinx, the stars, and the lost civilizations of the past. And while we may never have every answer, one truth remains undeniable. These monuments change us. They remind us that history is deeper, richer, and stranger than we've been told. They remind us that knowledge can survive even the end of worlds. And they remind us that we too are part of the story. The pyramids are not just monuments of the past. They are messages for the future, our future.